I just wanted to sort of open up with this initial slide. This is actually from a presentation I did a while back with the What's Left podcast around dyslexia screening. But this is an app-based education model on a phone, on a smartphone. I would say that child is probably maybe around 4. This is a child in Africa, I believe, in a natural setting, playing on a phone, absorbed in whatever content that is on that phone. And this app-based education module, Curious Learning, has many affiliations globally, but including MIT, which I consider the war machine, and the World Bank. And we'll be getting into World Bank finance of education later. But increasingly, there's going to be this melding between gamification, badge credential earning, psychometric data gathering, and economic systems, tokenized economic systems, tokenized knowledge systems that are going to take advantage of the most vulnerable people, including children. This is the issue. The issue is this 4-year-old child disconnected from the natural world, sitting on a dirt hill with a smartphone. And that's the context for all of what we're going to talk about today. Essentially, the focus is looking at the ways in which educational technology builds in gaming elements. And ultimately, the shift is going to be towards lifelong learning. So it's not just going to be that you graduate high school or community college or 4-year college, is that you will be expected to collect badges and micro-credentials forever and chase the next jobs because of the AI. And that along the way, global finance will be betting on individual learners to attain these credentials. And the system will be all tracked on blockchain. It will be tied to things like income sharing agreements, possibly UBI and conditional cash transfers linked to your learning and attaining these credentials. And then all of them are going to be linked into building the metaverse, training the AI, and really as we quote unquote learn, it is about the AI systems learning us, gathering data, including soft skills data and emotional data on human beings, workers and learners, to try to, I think, essentially become sentient, towards the singularity, whether or not they can achieve that, but I think that is their goal. And so in many respects, the tracking of competencies and transcripts as you do this gamified learning. And again, the gaming is, they want it to be fun and playful so people will stick with it. And there are very sophisticated levels of engineering that are underway in the gaming space to keep people hooked into the game and to keep them wanting to go to the next level and to score the next points and to do the next thing. They know how to do that. They want to keep you in the game because they want your data. And so if they can create education that is a game, including in transmedia learning, which means the game will not just be on your laptop or your phone, but it will be across platforms. So it may be in graphic novels, it may be in written materials, it may be on your phone, on a laptop, in augmented and extended reality, but that the narrative continues across all of the platforms. And that's something Elaine Rayborn has investigated. So that is moving forward. We talk about towards the end of this program, the World Bank has a pilot program that's a decade old at this point. It's called Evoke. And the goal is to train young people and condition them to Agenda 21, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And they just did a pilot on blockchain in 2020 under the pandemic in the country of Colombia around smart cities and training young people to do tasks and attain mastery transcripts for blockchain certifications that they can exchange for Telefonica minutes. And so this is a very early smart contract a program where people invest in learners. Rich people, not governments, are investing in learners and training them on blockchain. And that a lot of the assessment of skills in the gaming space is looking at psychometrics and behavioral analytics, how you operate in these virtual simulations based on what they throw at you, right? And so it is framing you as human capital, and then increasingly that's going to be feeding into the prediction markets for the human capital finance. And again, education is UN Sustainable Development Goal 4. This is linked to income sharing agreements. And later on in the presentation, we'll see Olive, who is looking at the ledger about self-financing her skills training. She's comparing Mandarin versus virtual reality programming and having an investor invest in her attaining these skills. And that was put out in 2016 by Institute for the Future. But that ledger system, they're advancing income sharing agreements. And I'm going to include a link. Unfortunately, the sound quality isn't great, but it's from Arizona State University and Global Silicon Valley talking about these agreements, and that they are very attractive for global capital right now, because as these portfolios are aligned to ESG investing, which is environmental social governance, which is the stakeholder capitalism approach, they don't have enough places to put their ESG money. They say there's only so many wind turbine projects. And so really they need to plow it into human capital around skills. And they find that the returns are beyond what they can get in other areas. And it's also a hedge against inflation by investing in future wages, because the way it works is that an investor invests in a learner, attaining skills, and then their future wages are garnished. So this is a huge growth market that people need to understand. But again, they want us to embrace it as a game. They want it to be fun. They want us to perceive it as fun and to forget that the entire metaverse, that this gamified simulation environment is built on defense in contracting interests and military history going back to the Cold War. This is just an event, the Geospatial Metaverse event, but I thought it was useful to look at some of the speakers. The Deputy Director of the CIA for Science and Technology, the National Governors Association, Synthetic Training Environments for the Army's Future Command, FEMA, Cesium. Now, Cesium is this image on the bottom here is what is the metaverse? A Philly Tech CEO who is helping build it explains. So yes, Cesium is actually downtown Philadelphia, and they're building the metaverse too. And sometimes it looks like a military simulation, and sometimes it looks like an entertainment ad, and sometimes it looks like a video game, and sometimes it looks like a real estate sales portfolio. And the metaverse can look like a lot of different things, but ultimately it's about virtualizing the world and then engineering it. And so then I would say this last one, this Kyle McCullough, he's the Director of Modeling and Simulation in the Institute for Creative Technologies, and that's the University of Southern California. So now we're sort of pivoting a little bit into my old stomping grounds with ed tech, because I found ICT, the Institute for Creative Technologies, back when I was studying educational technology software, and I realized that some of the math software that they were using in the Philadelphia schools was coming out of there, and it was funded by like the Army Research Lab. And a lot of it was actually looking at emotion sensing when using educational technology for math, and tracking like when kids were checking out because it was so boring, because everybody like pretty much hates online learning. And I remember like testifying in front of the school board like 4 years ago about specifically tracking emotion in educational software that was coming directly out of this Institute for Creative Technologies, which is the hybrid of Hollywood, Disney, and the Army Research Lab. You know, and so all of the animatronics, the synthetic people, the motion capture, ever since at least the mid 1990s, they have been joined at the hip to create the metaverse. And that's what we're waltzing into that now. And again, the metaverse isn't going to be built for the people who are 40 and up. It's going to be designed for the little kids, and it's going to be built by the opportunity youth, like the teens and early 20 somethings. And the rest of us are sort of hangers on and trying to be, I guess, to me, like the voice of moral reason as we're dragged into it, I guess. So I was talking about the University of Southern California's Institute for Creative Technologies. And again, like, I don't know why I ended up like seeing these things that now seem to be woven in, but for me, you know, as they're starting to pull back a little bit on some of the health stuff, the education piece, the educational technology piece, and the digital identity piece, and the impact investing piece are really, really central. And so a lot of the information that I encountered 5 years ago is becoming more and more relevant, and I understand it better. So Michael Zaida, he was one of the figures helping to set up the Institute for Creative Technologies. And in 1997, there was a report that was done called Modeling and Simulation, Linking Entertainment and Defense. And so those were sort of the origins of linking Hollywood with the Defense Department. And a lot of it is about narrative crafting, right? And it's, I mean, Jason, you've worked in film for ages, and so you know how important telling the story is, right? Telling the story to create social change, even though like sometimes maybe looking back, some of the documentaries or things you saw maybe had angles to them that were not fully anticipated within a context of impact investing or some of these other things. But like the storytelling element is really, really vital. And increasingly, stories are being told in mixed reality and in digital reality. And when we experience stories in digital spaces, they can capture our reactions and our responses to that. It's almost like the telescreens, you know, and feed it back and refine the stories. And so if you imagine, you know, living your real life in a choose your adventure book, right? You know, if you want to do A, go to this page. You want to go B, but that you're living in a choose your own adventure book that's being run by AI, and maybe you don't even know it, right? And you are being managed as, you know, as a life force, as a being, as a player. You know, all the world's a stage. Do we know we're players? Like, what is our agency in all of that? And I think as we start to merge with virtual world building, we need to understand that the side that we're merging with is inherently militarized and connected. Like, looking at what's happening in Hollywood, understanding the history of Operation Mockingbird, like the Mockingbird Press, and the use of propaganda and in digital entertainment, and to set things up, predictive programming, all of that, and how that marries with the military is really, really important. And that we're feeding this into children now, right? And they don't even have any sense of it. Like, you know, it was not until I was in my late 40s before I finally started to really understand the systems of power and the tools that were being used. Most people out there wouldn't really imagine that the entertainment industry complex, you know, how it's been weaponized against the populace. Like, people in our circles would, but most people wouldn't. Most people just don't even imagine. So, but we're being managed. They're feeding back, increasingly the devices are feeding back our responses into the system. And there's something called serious games. And this is, now all of these I would say on these slides, and we'll share the slide deck on the source when I have the link to the source. These are the reports. So go and look at it for yourselves, because I encourage people to do that. In this is like a page later from the Michael Zaida's report on visual simulation of virtual reality. He's talking about serious gaming. Now, increasingly, impact investors are interested in getting us all to do quote unquote serious games, especially in our communities that will feed signals intelligence. And this infographic, it's kind of hard to see a little bit, but it says, from game to serious game, unlike their entertainment only counterparts, serious games use pedagogy to infuse instruction into gameplay. And so one of the section in the middle there, it says human performance engineering team. So they're optimizing people, engineering people to perform, right? To perform their function in the larger machine. And that machine is a cybernetic social system that is increasingly being played out at a global level, you know, as we move towards sort of one world government, so we can advance. This is a clip. Actually, I have two clips from this. It's a people analytic conference at Wharton. So this is my backyard again. And so much of this stuff comes out of Wharton, and they're talking about like analyzing people and using games to analyze it. So this woman is a game designer, and the moderator is asking her about how much data is collected in games. And she's like, you know, we collect every click. We know who clicked what, how long they clicked, who clicked. And so in some games, you know, and she's talking about optimizing it to keep people in the game longer, right? To grow the brand of the gaming company. But you can also understand within serious games that that's a militarized venture, right? They want more clicks to get more intelligence to feed into their simulations and to make their predictions. But she said, like, in some of the games, they might have 3 data analysts for every game designer, just to manage the data analytics. And moving forward into the future that's being created, the future of work, the data analytics is really central.
Things I want to talk to you guys about I think would be interesting. But let's actually start, before we talk about games for analytics, let's talk about games and analytics, right? So for a very long time, long before there was a People Analytics Conference, game companies have realized that their goal is to optimize player interactions with the game systems they build. So I was wondering, since you have some experience in the industry, starting with you, Tricia, maybe a little bit about how game companies think about measuring performance and people and what they've learned about how to maximize behavior and performance.
Sure. Yeah, this is my first analytics conference, but outside of the fact that nobody's dressed like a superhero, it's actually very similar to a game developers conference. Is we love our data. We are constantly reviewing it all the time. Every click that you play in a game, we're measuring why you clicked, who clicked, when you logged on. Everything is collected and analyzed, and we go through it to make sure that we can improve our retention and we can improve our profit margin, our player base. And that's something, there's even companies out there that may have 1 to 3 data analysts per game designer that we have, because there's just so much data coming in. And so anyone out there that's actually interested in games, although I only saw like 2 people raise their hands and say Angry Birds, so gamers out there, we need people like you to be able to go in there and make games better.
So this is from a slide share from Michael Zaida, which I had touched on before. It's following up on essentially the report they did in 1997 about blending the Defense Department with entertainment. And it's quite an interesting slide share. I have 3 screenshots that I took from it. But they're saying, okay, so now we've had this gathering about how we could like benefit one another, how the Defense Department simulation R&D can benefit Hollywood and vice versa. What do we do next? And so, but this shows the way in which storytelling, narrative, wargaming, computing and VR. Now, this is again from the late 90s, right? So this is, we have quite a long lead time. How to get all of the simulations networked, and that is part of the metaverse. How does one work within the game? Because there's the non-playable characters, right? The autonomous agents in the game. We could be creating metaverse spaces, online functioning spaces where the gamified graphic design entities that are in there aren't even people. They could be coded reality, they could be coded AI, they could be machines, they could be a person who it doesn't look like the person. Like you could be operating in a collective learning environment or collaboration environment with a toaster. You know, you wouldn't know, like if the toaster has an avatar that makes it look like a cartoon character, you just wouldn't even know what it is. And that's the reality we're building for children right now, is these AI autonomous agents. So they want to create the center. You know, they've had this collaboration, and the center is to have a clearinghouse where EI, which is the entertainment industry, and that's both Hollywood and video game design, and DoD modeling, so Department of Defense, will have this virtual environment and simulation. So they know that they're, at this point, they know they're building the metaverse, essentially. I mean, they might call it network simulation and strategy and war games and storytelling, but they're going to build the metaverse. They want to do it collaboratively. They want a co-location. And they want to integrate it with the university system so that they can develop credentialed professionals with masters and PhDs in game design, in game theory, in the technology systems, so that they can eventually like develop that talent, right? And so this was created in the early 2000s. And so now, we're 20 years into this whole continuum. But if you didn't have access to this understanding, this context of what could possibly be wrong with a video game, right? How putting children in a video game because they like it and you could pay them money for it. Most people don't know this. A friend had said, "Oh, Allison, you really need to read Ender's Game." And so I ended up getting it on audiobook. It's an oldish book. I mean, it's over 20 years old, actually. Orson Scott Card is, the book was in its 20th anniversary in the audiobook, and that might have been several years old already. And he talked about actually conceptualizing this story in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And essentially, it's about child soldiers. It's a science fiction world where children are set up to fight what they call the buggers. And the buggers are this distant civilization that attacked humanity in the past, and it's sort of a hive mind consciousness, and that they would raise the children up, and they would do that because the children would believe what the adults told them. They got children young enough, and these are like brilliant kids, they screened them, that they would still trust the adults. And in this off-planet training environment, where they would stage all these battles and simulations, just like the wargaming simulations we're talking about, the hero is this young boy, Ender, and he goes back and forth, and he becomes more and more disillusioned because the adults actually take terrible advantage of the kids and treat them very badly. And he starts to question it. And then the culmination of the book, he's in a simulation environment, and he's the commander of these forces, and it's all a video game, right? It's all a gamified simulation, and it's his like final exam. And what he comes to realize at the end, he ends up destroying this planet with this, terrible device that like separates all the molecules. And it's only afterwards, and this is a child who's very empathetic and never really wanted to hurt anyone. And they said, actually, you know what, Ender, it was all real. Like all those battles, it wasn't a game. It was actually really happening. Like you really just destroyed a whole planet. And he was broken because he didn't know that it was real. And so what I'm trying to say is like, we're moving towards a future with remote robotic labor where human computing interfaces may connect us or connect our avatars to remote robotics, conducting actions in places that we can no longer actually conceptualize or could be framed as gamified environments. And I think there may be even a Black Mirror episode to that effect, like that you might understand something one way and it is misrepresented. And so for me, like that was really formative this week as I was putting together this slide share, is understanding like adults taking advantage of children, taking advantage of the naivety of children, and then the way in which, how can we tell what is real and what is not real? And even as we move into this world of deep fakes and distance learning and, environments where we live as avatars, it's really unsettling. So Civic Gaming. About CivilX. All right. It is an online platform that allows players to engage in media, education, gamified work, events, community development. It provides stories, resources, and tools for easy replication of good ideas in diverse locations around the world. It is a cooperative-based media platform for accessing training, workshops, co-op workspaces, and online team building. And so the question here is a little bit like, all right, you've got a mobile app with educational content, and I think you're going to see moving forward about like serious gaming and blockchain technology and badging and how this sort of works together. But I would say if you've got a good idea, you don't necessarily need to share it around the world. Like a good idea for one location is not necessarily a great idea for another location because it's like contextual, right? It's based on your geography. It's based on your climate. It's based on various things. So again, it presumes a certain level of a one world solution sort of answer. And again, gamified working. So it's a combination of a gaming platform and a content consumption platform, which is very much in line with sort of these lifelong learning mobile app systems that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. I guess that's supposed to be a funny picture. There's about 6 or 7 people connected with it. One of them is in New Zealand. I guess I think he's based in Austin. But they're talking about like building eco-villages and digital organization tools for community development. And again, like, I just don't think if you have an eco-village, you necessarily need a gamified content creation platform. But that's what this is set up to do. I believe it is a connection to this civic gaming space. In the last presentation we did, I talked a lot about social impact investing in the gaming space because it was collecting behavioral data. And the Entertainment Software Association was very much into games for impact. Games for Change is another one of these organizations that has been around for over a decade about inspiring youth to explore civic issues, and STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math, which sounds kind of a lot like, here, go online and learn some stuff on our game through our watching our videos. It's a similar type of vibe. This is about a 3-minute video. You can see from the branding on the front, like the opening segment has, a dial with these various icons, but it's all rainbow. So it does feel rather sustainable development goal space. And what they do is they talk about in the beginning, like, enter all of your personal information, like enter where you were born, enter your birth date, enter all your skills so we know all about you. And meanwhile, you can see on the one side, like there's this genetic DNA base stuff spinning around. It's a little bit strange. So like some of it is connected to, like, ultimately it's like, here, once we know your skills, we can fit you into the community, and here, watch like our hempcrete video. And I would just say, like, one, like, you don't need it gamified. And two, why would you share all of your information in that space? The emphasis on the nature of the avatar building and the energetics, and it's, some of it's sort of astrological and like the level of detail, it's unsettling. And especially when you talk about like building yourself into a community. For me, like, I don't think if you're building a truly legitimate community, you learn people by working together in real space. You don't do it on a game, and you don't do it with badging and that sort of thing. So to me, this seems like a giant amount of data capture, and it's hard to say like how sophisticated it actually is. But I think for the purposes of me talking about like transmedia learning and consumer content, it's relevant to what I'm going to talk about later with the World Bank's game Evoke, and the way in which they pull youth into like feeling empowered by doing project-based learning, when really it's about badge collection and them learning you.
Welcome, Seeker. Welcome to CivilX, Civilization Explorer. You have entered the Avatar Builder. Please enter your birth date, time of birth, city of birth. Thank you. Your avatar is now being calibrated. Once calibrated, you will be able to review your astrological birth chart, human design, gene keys, Mayan astrology, and more. This in-depth understanding of yourself as a player in the game allows you to pair with other players that need your skills and assets. Enter the Civilization Builder. Please enter your skills and passions on the wheel of co-creation. You have selected infrastructure. You now have access to a vast library of infrastructure and building resources. Select the resource you would like to review. You now have access to materials, instructional videos, photos, and reviews of the building process. Instant download of blueprints and plans. You have completed your basic training. You are now being transported to the virtual multiverse. Explore the world around you and learn from others in a virtual and augmented learning environment. Co-create with others and solve large problems through gamified quests. Interactive sharing of environmental data points locally and abroad. Design and build worlds you have only dreamed of. Letting your imagination run wild, you can co-create the world of the future. Combining science and art, merging new technology with ancient wisdom. You may now engage in created realities. New fields of play are continuously added, inspired by living communities worldwide. Virtual gameplay goes live as solutions are proven and can be established in daily life. Networks are built, resources are shared quickly and efficiently. What is tested and proven in the virtual multiverse can now be implemented into your human world.
Serious games are important. We spent a bit of time earlier talking about the Institute for Creative Technologies and Mike Zaida and human engineering and wargaming. The Knight Foundation, which actually their money came from the newspaper publishing business, they work very closely with Niantic on augmented reality and augmented cities. So they're working and this is 2016 that they had started their relationship with Niantic, but boosting civic engagement. And I will say, part of this, the organization that I used to work for had support from Knight Foundation, and we were involved in, I did not ever participate in any of the events, but I heard secondhand that they were about things like metrics for social mixing. These were things that they were asking for. And to me, once you start blending Niantic, which was, the seed funding was from In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA's venture capital arm, and you're talking about monitoring civic behavior, civics for good, and you want to monitor social mixing, that's a lot of data analytics that are being poured into the simulation system. So serious games are a thing. It's actually, I put a link here, the origins of serious games, if people want to read it. I think it's useful information to have to understand where it came from. Serious games were used in management theory, like systems theory, as early as the 1970s by this guy, Clark Abt, ABT Associates. But a lot of the early serious gaming was done as part of Cold War strategy. So again, it's military simulation. Not all of it was on computer, but a lot of it was. The serious games were used for military strategy, but at the bottom, I just wanted to point out, they were created by it says all of these computer games were created by scientists to do research in computer science, especially in the artificial intelligence field. And so, and this is dating to the 50s that they were making these assessments, that it was gaming, chess gaming, but it was towards military intelligence and towards refining artificial intelligence. And so a lot of the learning that was happening in the gaming environments was learning to train the modeling systems and to train the AI, which is important moving forward. The early video games were designed for training during the Cold War. They were for military purposes, and a lot of the computer-based war games, the research, the R&D was around wargaming specifically. So even though these video games are all supposed to be fun, there were they came out of a serious purpose, these serious games, and the games are about domination, which I talk about a lot. This is from, oh look, the font, it looks so playful. The Playful City Lab at American University. So here they're talking about augmented reality again. This is 2018. They have a lab that they're working with the Pokemon Go and the Knight Foundation, and they make it sound so cute. Cities remix a playful platform to experiment with embedding Pokemon Go and case studies in this. So everything is supposed to seem really fun. And that's what I would say. It goes back to the little boy on the dirt and the guy saying, well, if they don't know that they're being oppressed, is it a problem? Right? If they don't know is a problem, just because it's a problem, is it a problem for them? And I would say it's a problem. We should resist systems of domination, and they want to make us want it, and they want to make the children want it, and play and playfulness is a central part of their strategy. And so this is from the press release of the earlier image. They're talking about Niantic again. When you see Niantic, I think you can substitute the CIA or state intelligence. And it said, by turning city spaces into game boards, we're hoping to bring communities together in entirely new ways. And so I would say, with Jordan Larson's game, and I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing, but he's creating an extended reality in his game by linking content creation and asking you to invest your digital identity in this avatar in this space to create global community building. in that way, it's like an extended reality. And this way, it maybe is extended reality more into physical space, as opposed to his game space is more maybe just purely digital, although he does talk about bringing community together. But I think it's important to think of it in that context, right? Cities as game boards. And that's a lot of what I talk about in the Smart Cities talk I gave in Tucson. The report that they developed with Niantic, it reveals how play can build local ties and reveals some of the networks emerging through play in our neighborhoods. So again, it's about wargaming, it's about AI training, and it's about tracking emergent networks. And so they want to game you so that they can track your networks, and maybe they can know what you're going to do before you even know yourself. And so this report was developed through American University with the Game Lab and their Center for Media and Social Impact. Again, the social impact is being built into all of the digital media space. And this is somewhat in line with what we saw in Michael Zaida's slide share, where he was asking for more professionals in the gaming space, more academic credentialing, and more universities that were bought into the intersection of systems engineering and gamification. And so like there are many, I would say, like probably if you're you live in a city with a university, like you should poke around and look, because there's probably a center for gaming in there somewhere, a center for civic participation and social impact, that those things are all coming together and they're being expanded much more broadly beyond University of Southern California. So the father of the video game, I actually thought that this was quite interesting, Ralph Baer. The modeling, he was awarded, he was given like a lifetime award from the Modeling and Simulation Hall of Fame in 2016 for paving the way for simulation history. And he did this as an employee of, I think it might be Sanders Systems, but it was the predecessor of BAE Systems, so defense contracting. And so again, it's the context matters. In the 1960s, he was trying to figure out how to put video games on television sets, right? Which is already programming. Like we already know there's the programming through the television. So now it's an interactive programming, which is taking it to the next level, coming out of defense simulation systems. So here it says, I think Sanders Associates like was the predecessor, and then it became part of the BAE legacy business. But again, like Baer was like, hey, there's these TVs. Like, and I'm sure he didn't like imagine himself as like the dominator of the world, right? Like at the time, he's like, this is kind of cool. How can I do something else with this television? Like that's how it starts. Like, it also says he invented Simon, which I love that Simon game, like with the like pattern recognition, like beep, beep, beep. It had the 4 colors and like, I played that a lot when I was a kid. So he invented, he can't be all bad, right? But like, so that's what scientists do. They have technologies and like, how can we use this for stuff? But you can't discount where it's emerging from. And it's emerging from a system of domination as based in militarization. And then ultimately, like these systems, these gaming systems are being used to refine the AI. So the simulation industry, it is military. And I've talked about this before. And Joseph Gonzales, who spent time in both the gaming industry and the military industry, has spoken to how it's a revolving door. I would say as we're moving towards building the metaverse, and I know we talked a little bit about some of the Cesium podcasts about building the open metaverse, or co-hosted with Cesium, that they're trying to build these standards of interoperability, because the metaverse has to be interoperable. There have to be some standards that allow you to move from different parts of the metaverse and for it to remain at least consistent enough that you can get in and out of the different spaces in the metaverse and that it functions the way it's supposed to function. So standardization is very central. And in the simulation industry, those standards are not just going to be standards in the defense space, but they're going to be standards in the entertainment industry space. And that's something that was, established by that connection through the Institute for Creative Technologies in the late 1990s, that those standards were going to be connected. And so the entertainment and the militarization would go hand in hand. I thought this was actually really interesting. The proceedings of the IEEE, the International Electrical Engineers Association or whatever, like these people are all over everything. Like they're part of blockchain, they're part of digital identity, they're part of virtual reality, they do all the stuff. This is a paper from them from 1995. And it's documenting the history of Simnet, which was a DARPA project. And I'm just going to read this out loud because within the metaverse, the new form of warfare, which is, as Giordano always talks about, is the mind is the battle space. Those are the weapons. The weapons aren't necessarily just tanks and armored, missiles and planes, but in the mind as battle space, the weaponized narrative and framing. So if you kind of just substitute some of those tools out, but I think what they're talking about, Simnet, which dated from 1983 to 1990, which was an ARPANET project, is about building this metaverse. And so, okay, so it says the emphasis of Simnet from the outset was on enhancing tactical team performance by providing commanders and troops an opportunity to practice their skills in a dynamic free play environment in which battle outcomes depend on team coordination and individual initiative rather than on scripted scenarios controlled by an instructor. This program demonstrated the feasibility of linking together hundreds or thousands of simulators representing tanks, infantry, fighting vehicles, helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, etc., to create a consistent virtual world in which all participants experience a coherent, logical sequence of events. In this world, the causal connections among these tactical events from the individual crew station to the battalion are clear and easily inspectable. And I know that maybe sounds like a lot, but if you can imagine, like I encourage you, like if you have the time to read Ender's Game, like the central, like the core of the story happens in the simulators. It happens in these various kinds of simulators in practice battles, which then eventually end up being real battles, and they don't tell the kids anything has changed. But that is the metaverse, is to create the thousands of simulators that are interoperable and can function in a way where people have free play, right? But even within the free play, you can see that all of the events are clear and easily inspectable. And I think within the metaverse, that ability to inspect, to track the connections and to go back and revisit, because the military wants that to figure out how to optimize their training and for the outcomes they want, that the inspectable nature and the interoperable nature and the ostensible free play nature in the virtual environment is really central to understanding the metaverse. And I know that might be kind of complicated to understand, but the war, the way we imagine war looking, and I'm not saying that it can't happen at all, but that there's a whole new version of warfare that's coming online, and we don't understand it as warfare. And that, again, when we're talking about how problematic could it be to stick kids in a video gaming platform and have them earn some cash, is that people are not yet understanding that that space that we're putting them into is a space of military engagement, of the mind, you know? So again, this is just an image from Ender's Game. This is actually from the IE Spectrum magazine. Again, they're saying that the military is ready for it. This is just talking a little bit more about the Institute for Creative Technologies, and I don't need to spend a lot more time on this, but at this point of the article, I think in 2002, and imagine what it is now, that they employ 180 game developers, filmmakers, artists, and engineer, and half the budget is from the Army. So essentially the ICT has been involved in creating synthetic people, creating permanent learning agents, creating AI agents that will function in the metaverse in a way that you may not be able to understand that they're actually not real people. This is just Mike Zaida's little sys entry. You can see the defense linking entertainment and defense modeling simulation program, but then he was also involved, that program itself, in a personalized learning assistant. But he came out of the Naval Graduate School. So a lot of the ed tech scenario simulations dating back to the mid-90s were connected to the Navy and the Office of Naval Research. This is from his SlideShare again. But many of the challenges that face the movie industry, the game industry, and the Department of Defense are the same. Multiplayer simulations in real time with 3D graphics, networking, low cost, human modeling, and autonomous agents. And I think, Jason, because you've been listening to some of those Metaverse podcasts, this is 20 years ago that they had already laid out the groundwork for what they needed to happen. And we're getting very close. I mean, they've gotten close enough that they're willing to put the metaverse into the mainstream media consciousness now.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it, but it's clear to me that it's not what people think it is. People think it's just this VR and it's just going to be gaming, but it's clearly much bigger than that. And a lot of the stuff I've been looking at is actually like what NVIDIA is doing, because they're working on creating the the interoperability part. And they're also there's a thing called USD, which is Universal Scene Descriptor, which was created by Pixar. And I'm curious if that relates to these earlier IIE standards that I don't know enough about. Like I'm not versed enough on the tech part of it. So, but I'm just still learning myself. But it's clearly going to play. Some people try to downplay it and like, oh, this isn't going to catch on or whatever. And it's like, no, this is coming.
This has been a long time in the works.
Yeah. This is a big deal, and it's not what people think it is. It's not just yes, it's a 3D web that's interoperable, but it's going to be interacting with our education, our healthcare, with policing.
It's not to be dismissible. And again, the interface between the industries, they've been working together for a long time, and it is interoperable. Like their goal is that, and that's why I'm saying I think they're preparing youth for coding and existing in this metaverse, but it will all have to be defended because it's all subject to hacking and crappy data and a lot of other stuff that it's not all going to hang together. It's not going to be seamless. It's going to be like spackled, with like duct tape. And so there's going to be people building it, and then there's going to be people defending it. And so the cyber security, cyber warfare element is really like what they have to groom the youth to want to do, to agree to do. So to defend the oasis, I guess. It's important to think about later. I'll show the Lego skills gaming systems, these online phone-based systems, which again, the little boy on the dirt hill had that little phone, and that's going to be your personal assistant for lifelong learning. And this is coming out of the Navy, and literally they want to have a module in some sort of communication device, and eventually it just might be embedded in augmented reality in your brain that's going to tell you what to do next. And it's going to be your GPS, and you're not going to necessarily get to decide where you go on the map, but you're going to do that. And so the USC ICT developed this. Also, you see Arizona State there, the Office of Naval Reserve, and it's interesting. You've got this drone kind of thing, but it's like Pixar-ish, right? It's supposed to look cute. Look, it's your lifelong learning program. It's going to give you tutorials. It's going to, tell you what to do. Look, you have a roadmap. You have skills and badges. And once you look at like, here, use this content, demonstrate your compliance, show us what you know. And that's essentially what that gamification thing that Jordan Larson, that CivilX is looking at, is to develop, here, consume this, and then let us figure out where you fit into the community. So, it's not so different. Now, this is a military construct, but this idea of having this all live on a device is being in putting it into a game so that it seems fun is being normalized. And I think that's part of what that CivilX is doing, is normalizing it.
It's a well-known adage that knowledge deteriorates if not used. But it's often hard to know which information and skills will be necessary down the road. The U.S. Navy determined a need for knowledge maintenance between sailors' school learning and assignments. So they enlisted computer scientists, educators, and artists at the USC Institute for Creative Technologies to collaborate with leading universities in order to create PAL, a personal assistant for lifelong learning.
Hi, I'm PAL.
PAL is a personal guide through the next-gen training platform PAL 3. It knows the user's learning record, what they studied, how they performed, and what they need for success on the job. Resources include online content, interactive diagrams, and intelligent tutoring systems. PAL 3 guides sailors through the maze of school to assignment to advancement while keeping them up to date and up to speed with all the rapidly changing knowledge they need to perform their jobs confidently and successfully.
That's what I call a job well done. Later, Gator.
Okay, future of work. What is the future of work? So before this pandemic was announced, this is in like February of 2020. You can see this article. I think this is a BBC article actually, and like, I know what blockchain is about. I know what digital identity and online education skills badging is about. And I see this article. I don't even know how I came across it. And it says, it's education, the new currency. And this is what we keep talking about, Jason, is trying to talk about money is more like freedom tokens. And we have to unlearn what we imagine currency being, because it's going to be something else in the future. It's going to be these conditional, programmable, tokenized scripts. And that if this goal, everybody keeps saying, like, what is the goal? What is the goal? And, you know, what I assert is that through biotechnology and AI and quantum computing, that they want to mirror our beingness and our spirits and our souls, not just of humans, but of all life, to crack the code of life and then become the supreme coders of the universe. Our marching orders are to train it how to be human, right? Which is not possible, but that's what it wants to do, to learn us from the inside out. And so all of the education stuff is actually flipped, and that we're teaching the AI. So when they talk about us being learners, no, they are learning us, and that is the framing. And so they need to find some way of keeping us as pets or pigeons in a box, as, you know, BF Skinner might have, or whatever, while they do that, until they're done with us, they get their singularity and they boost off planet and the predator energy goes over the universe or whatever. I don't want that to happen. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's how I imagine they think it's going to happen. And so coming up with some sort of universal basic income with a baseline level education consumption model where you get quote unquote paid for your data, right? Like, we already know people get paid for their health data. Here, this entity called the Learning Economy, the Learning Economy Foundation, which was featured in February of 2020, is that they want to develop roadmaps for jobs, for this post-job economy, this post-human economy, actually, and that they're going to collect all of this data on these apps and on these mobile devices, and that governments and employers will be willing to pay to get access a dashboard. But I don't think it's going to be exactly like that, but they're going to pay to get access to data. There's going to be some sort of script-based credit in learning. So that is what education being the new currency is about. And the Learning Economy Foundation is central to all of this. And so this is actually, I didn't fully grasp how important this was or how connected this organization was, even though I knew it had ties to the UN in February of 2020. But like, the rest of it is going to be sort of fleshing this out. So we talk about the future of work. This is a report that was done by Deloitte, and they're talking about preparing tomorrow's workforce for the fourth industrial revolution. And you know, there's a lot in this report, but to me, this stood out. Like, who understands what the fourth industrial revolution is among the youth and the future of work? Does anybody? And I would say, so 74% of the people either don't really know what they're talking about. And then 26, I guess the achievers know what the fourth industrial revolution is. But I would say, even if you ask most adults, they don't know. If you said, what is the future of work? Like, they may have some vague idea, but they don't know. And so they're taking advantage of this model to push people into the directions that they want them pushed. This is Richard Baldwin. It is a 2018 talk on globotics, which is a world of remote robotics where people essentially compete for work on blockchain. He's imagining the day that this is after automatic translation of languages, so that you can essentially, based on your blockchain credentials, the AI can choose you for any job anywhere in the world, that it's all gig-based employment. And as we've known, like we've shown that clip with Charles Hoskinson of Cardano before, that the metadata collected since you're in preschool will decide if you're in alignment with the government and worthy of having a job, you know? And so that's the future of work. And that's the thing that frustrates me so much when I listen to these World Bank conversations, when I listen to the Metaverse conversations. And this guy is influential. Like, he's literally, like, they're planning, and I've seen reports in the UN where they talk about, we can't wait till the time that there are Mexican landscapers who stay in Mexico and mow lawns with robots in Texas, and that Kenyan housekeepers stay in Kenya and they clean hotel rooms in Norway. Isn't this going to be this amazing future of work? And that's something that's been described in that movie, Sleep Dealer, right? Is like, you plug in and you port, and through remote robotics, you do the work. And so no one's telling the little boy on the dirt hill that that's the future that's being planned. And that's the thing, like, when I keep saying, like, what are we doing? Are we jerking around here? Like, this is being planned out. And it's so much bigger than a public health event. Like, literally, it's a post-human event that's creating a synthetic world where where our humanity is just completely discounted. And for us, it's not going to be great, but like, I maybe have another, 25 years or so, in the hopper. These little kids, it's their whole life. And so it matters that we say something. So when we listen to Richard Baldwin's clip about the future of work, it's pretty grim. And he talks about it that once this all goes digital, the physics of digital assets, digital goods, digital skills are so fast that it will, like Moore's law, like we can't even fathom the repercussions at this point. And yet no one's really taking it seriously. I mean, he's giving this TED Talk. I mean, clearly has some audience here, but no one, when you talk about the future of work, about blockchain identity in the metaverse, is anyone actually grappling with, like, is this a moral thing to do to a 3-year-old to set this up for them to have to do this? And I would say too, like my framing on this, and this is why I keep saying like we need a global peace movement against AI, is that like this is making everybody's children compete against every other person's child for scraps, so that the BlackRocks of the world, like the UBS banks of the world, can like continue to extract profit out of misery, right? And so like it's not immigrants that like there are a lot of people on the conservative side who keep imagining that immigration is the way it is, and I'm like, no, immigration is going to be some avatar and a remote robot, and whatever maintenance of your physical border isn't going to affect that. And guess what? It's going to suck for their kids too, and our kids. Like we should make it right for all the kids, not because we want our kids to have it better than their kids. Like there's enough in this world if we figured out how to address like the parasitic, like predatory debt finance militarism element of this, that we could all be okay, right? Like that's the conversation I think we should be having, and that if we did that, we could have it in a principled, unified way.
Arbitrage drives globalization. Countries are especially good at making some things and less good at making other things. And globalization is driven by companies exploiting these differences. A critical aspect of this selling elsewhere is that it takes place mostly in physical goods, things we make. There's a very good reason for that. It's easier to ship goods across borders than it is to ship the things that we do across borders, what we economists call services. If you don't work in a factory or farm, you're in the service sector. The reason your job hasn't been globalized yet is because it's hard to ship services across borders. The service provider and the service buyer have to be in the same place at the same time. Digital technology is making it easier for people who sit in one nation to do things in another nation. Imagine we lived in a Star Trek world where workers could teleport from one country to another. A US accountant, for example, costs 5 times more than a Polish accountant. And in a Star Trek world, Polish accountants would teleport into New York City accounting offices in the morning and teleport back home at night. Digital technology is tearing down the barriers to telemigration. Now, up till now, most of this telecommuting has been domestic, but it doesn't take a lot of imagination to realize that this telecommuting will go global. Foreign talent will be a whole lot cheaper. Hundreds of millions of talented, low-cost foreign freelancers who were excluded from telemigrating up till now by poor language skills will soon be speaking good enough English or French, and some of them will be able to do at least some of your job for less. We saw that telemigration is profitable, that telemigration is possible. It's coming faster than most believe. Future globalization will be about things that we do, not just things that we make. And I hope along the way I've managed to raise your level of anxiety a little bit.
So in this engineered economy, like, and this is going to be run on blockchain and AI, in the US, I think in 2014, Obama passed the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And so this is all about setting up regional workforce pathways. And it was kind of crazy at the time when I was in the education space looking at this, thinking, well, how is this going to work if this region has this 8 economic sectors if you want to move to some other region that doesn't have that sector? And it was before I understood remote robotics and telepresence labor and all this stuff, but then also that, I mean, it was unimaginable to me, the economic situation that they were going to put in. But I think in Southeastern Pennsylvania, our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the top growth jobs are all pay other than like one or two, under $12 an hour, which you can't live in Philadelphia. You can't raise a family in Philadelphia on like $12, $15 an hour. It's crazy. Like there was like 2 of the 15 jobs paid like 50 and 30 bucks, like a manager and accountant. Everybody else was at starvation wages. And this, it's very hard because, again, on the conservative side, there are a lot of people who are like, oh, it's the communists or the socialists. I'm like, no, this is being set up by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm pretty sure they're not communist or socialist. Like this was set up by Mark Tucker and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce way back to set up mastery-based education, proficiency-based education, to align apprenticeships so that they could engineer the workforce. And, I would say, like, who thinks it's a good idea to let the people who are at the top making all the money decide what their workforce is going to be, to like use our education system to decide their workforce? Because of course they're always going to get like, program 25% more than they need so they can pay the least wages. If you give the people at the top with all of the resources the chance to run the system, they're going to run it to their advantage, which means everyone else is disadvantaged, which is what the system is. But it's not a socialist program. It's like embedded within the US government. It's not a Chinese program. It's our program, and it was set up by the US Chamber of Commerce, which again, IBM and all these Exxon that are setting it up are not communist. Like it's not how it works. But this is a global system that is running where it's going to pit every single child and young person against every other single child and young person, which is why we need a unified movement for humanity and children. Regarding Colorado, so one of the central players in all of this space in the future of work is the Markle Foundation, and that's based in Colorado. It's all about automation and industrialization, but cybersecurity is a huge piece of that, right? So they're talking about Rework America is part of it. That's upskilling, reskilling, keeping people on the treadmill, unlock experience-based job progressions to good jobs, which means like stick on our pathway, jump through our hoops, we'll track you. That's coming out of McKinsey, the Atlanta Federal Reserve, and the National Urban League, right? So it's all going to be framed as equity. Just keep jumping through our hoops. We got you. We're watching. You're getting there. And like, every time like the finish line gets pulled back further and further, like it's more equitable, it's more just wait for it. And that's it. But that's like embedded in Colorado. And that's really important. Like, as you guys are advancing as like this, digital state blockchain nation, is that the Markle Foundation is a real key player in all of this.
Who is the character in the Peanuts cartoon where he's going to kick the football and every single time she pulls it away?
Oh, Lucy.
That's right.
Learning Economy has one of its bases in Colorado. This woman, Jana Persky, who's the chief of staff at CareerWise. So they're going to set you up on your career pathways to track your skill and upskill for the new economy. She started in 2021, but prior to that, she had been with the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, which is interesting, working in opportunity zones, which is, again, where it's going to be targeted for impact investing. But she was part of a strategic initiatives program only for 6 months, really, in 2018, but it included the Blockchain Council. So the Opportunity Zone program was in tandem with the Blockchain Council. And again, the CareerWise Colorado, the people who are pushing it, their funders, right, include people like Michael Bloomberg and the United Way and JP Morgan Chase and the Gates Foundation, and the Walton Family Foundation, right? Because we know that Walmart cares about human capital, right? It's about supply chain management is what it is. And the United Way is central with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in setting up managing the working poor, which is what these blockchain, GPS upskilling, social impact, career pathways to build the metaverse are about. So there you go. So this is Learning Economy. They have 3 different lab spaces now. One is Broward County, which is outside of Miami. One is the whole state of Colorado. Lucky you guys. Whole state with a unified but decentralized, don't worry, Jason, it's decentralized ecosystem for innovation, pilots, research, collaboration on the future of education and work. And this is why I want to emphasize this so much with what Derek was saying. It's like, well, how can video games be such a problem? And I'm like, the problem is that games and education and work are all going to start to blend into these really weird mixes where it's like, here, spend some time on a phone and get some tokens or skills and train the AI. And it's all going to get messed up together. And so it matters now that you say, you can't just be like, it's just a video game, Allison. Like, what harm could it do? It's like, it could do a lot of harm because literally they want to live your life in a video game. What I'm saying is that within the construct of this militarized AI telepresence work, that your education and your work and your gaming are all going to start to interface on your phones with your digital identity systems. And they're going to be tracking your human capital against your counterparts, right? Like your peers, like pretty soon Colorado is going to be competing with Broward County, right? And there's going to be dashboards, and JP Morgan Chase and the Walton Family Foundation are going to be tracking, and the United Way is going to be giving all the kids, data dashboard information because Obama gutted FERPA, student data privacy rights, to give it to community partners. And it's all going to become one muddled mess. And so it really actually matters that people have a firm position on how we treat children, because there's not going to be a clear differentiation between all of these things, between gaming and educational work moving forward and AI profiling. It's going to be all connected. I've been working my way through. I would encourage folks, I have the source link on here. The World Bank has this blockchain for education learning economy model. So they're working with the Learning Economy Foundation. It's not just the UN. You can see the participating organizations, which I have the arrow down by Learning Economy, but it's the Asian Development Bank, Arizona State University, Coinbank, Consensus, the MIT Media Lab, Estonia, the EU, the Gates Foundation, OECD, SAP, Stanford, Telefonica, UNICEF. I mean, this is huge, this thing. And later on, I'm going to talk about Evoke and this sustainable gaming system, gaming environment. But the creation of digital wallets with digital identity and student ownership of data. And again, they want you sovereign, so you become a commodity as you own your data and you sell your data, and they give you little scrap points and throw you some freedom tokens every once in a while to keep you playing the game. But there are these webinars started in February of 2021, and I guess there's a half dozen of them. I've been making my way through them. They're kind of boring, and I have to say, for the most part, the people who are in there don't seem to fully understand grasp what they're doing. I mean, they're totally sold on hey, if you just had enough data, if you just had granular enough information, you would have the perfect pathway to the perfect job to be super happy and fulfill yourself and fulfill the world. And that's not going to happen. But that's the story that they tell themselves in there. So anyway, I would encourage you that I think this is really important, and to spend some time, if you can, follow the source link and look at these webinars. Early on in this the space, when I was tracking badge-based learning, proficiency-based education, this XAPI technology or tin can API technology, I came across this guy, Michael Hruska, and I think he actually may have ties in Philadelphia. And he was connected with developing tin can API and tracking verification of activities through mobile devices. So before XAPI, Tin Can API, they had SCORM, Shareable Content Object Reference Module. That worked for laptops and things, but it didn't work for phones or tablets or wearable technology. So this XAPI essentially could track you in the spatial web. You can see here, learning ecosystems capitalize on a web of data to enhance learning by placing sensors within learning ecosystems. We have a GPS-like ecosystem. So literally, they're putting you in the web in a motion capture suit, so they can track your activities, right? And they're going to say, hey, as you're interacting in these virtual worlds, or consuming content on YouTube videos. And again, that goes back to Jordan Larson's video game, hey, consume this content, earn a badge, do gamified work, that it's all feeding into your GPS. And their story they're telling themselves is because we have really good navigation for you, we're just looking out for your best interests. We're going to navigate you to a great spot. Don't worry. And I think if you understand what the World Bank is and what the World Bank does, that's not true. So they're living in a story that they tell themselves, and the people who do the World Bank seminars have the story that they're living in, so they can get out of bed every day. And the people who are in their webinars, that they can be we've got great GPS. We're all going to the top, guys. but that's not how the cyborg avatar capitalism model works. It's just not. So so this goes back to 2016, and this is why I can say I've had a long lead time, that this is all really just clicking together now. And this is a short video, and we'll show this later, and it's really boring. But I would say you might want to watch this a couple times if you haven't seen it already. It's saying we can track this. And essentially it reduces education into a noun, verb, object statement. And on the noun is often the source of the data. Like, I did this. And essentially what they want to do is recreate human beings as it's the data, it's this granular data, and you are a set of skills. And so your digital twin is crafted by all the things that you have done, that they have tracked you across the metaverse, through your phone, through the books you checked out at school, through the YouTube videos you watched, through whatever like degrees you actually graduated with, and then you get to this. And then at the end, I would say, yeah, definitely pay attention to Johnny Rogers in the Army and like what his progression is, right? Because that's very telling, and you might want to watch it a couple times. Because this is the trajectory, and that you have to understand that the AI feedback loops are using your data, and then they're feeding it back into the GPS system, and they're tweaking your coordinates. So you may think you're going to a certain destination, right? Like, they may have promised you a certain destination, but the feedback loops based on the information you're feeding it as they track you. And at the end, like, that's the tagline, like, we can track it. And you know that augmented reality is the CIA's video game, but it's fun. That BlackRock and the World Bank are running the program with the central banks. The destination isn't going to be the destination you think it is, as much as they want to tell you that learning happens everywhere, and it's all in the panopticon. Opportunity youth is an important concept to understand. Again, as I said, they're building the metaverse for the 3 and 4-year-olds, or the unborn, the people who are in like Tess Lowry's like prenatal care blockchain baby program. The ones who are building it are going to be the disconnected kids, opportunity youth, so ages 16 to 24, who aren't in education and aren't in employment. And I think we have to understand that the past 2 years, largely with the consent of the teachers, of ruining education and making it miserable and ruining all the social aspects of what it's like to learn in community, which the teachers and the unions have totally done. I mean, it's at their doorstep, right? Like, I've been telling them this is coming for forever. They've created a disconnect, right? They've created this environment where people might as well be disconnected, because the reality of what they have to get up to do to do whatever counts as school now, not that it was ever great, is so abysmal that they're just going to unplug, right? So you're going to have all these disconnected, disaffected people, and then that's your market for pay for success for the opportunity youth, is to reconnect them with the mobile phone device and the proper gaming. They can reconnect into the metaverse and be good digital citizens, and that's the goal. in 2012, this Measure of America, like they created a report about opportunity use. So again, just to restate, 16 to 24 who are disconnected from school or work. Now we know that the last 2 years has been totally about creating that disconnection, right? And so it's not just in the United States, even though I guess this report was the US, it's worldwide. So they're targeting this demographic, I think, to build the metaverse. So who is Measure of America? The Social Science Research Council. Who funds them? There are a lot of funders. I pulled some of them. America's Promise is very much behind evidence-based Pay for Success Finance. Draper Foundation, again, that's Tim Draper. That's like, hey, be in Estonia, become an avatar, join us as a digital citizen. The EU is part of this. This is global. Jobs for the Future. Jobs for the Future is setting all of these pathways out. They've taken millions upon millions upon millions of dollars of Gates Foundation money. Rockefeller Foundation, United Nations, United Way, they're all going to lay out the pathways, and that's the gamification pathways. And I'll just reemphasize that the talk that I gave in Tucson about smart cities and education and the gamification speaks to this in a lot more detail. So what do you need to do Pay for Success Finance? You need to have not public investment, right? So essentially what they're saying is, here's a labor graph that talks about investing in youth labor. Now, I would question, like as a mom, other than, again, if we had a working global economy and that people had stable jobs, that youth would just really have to work for their own pocket money or entertainment stuff, and that it wouldn't be, for a main source of familial support. And we know that that's not the case. But like the thought that we're going to automate all these jobs and then expect the youth and the elderly to do this work, to me, that makes no sense. If you're going to automate all this stuff, then you don't actually need the children and the old people to do this work, other than that you're making them jump through hoops and get badges. To create the public-private partnerships, that is what Pay for Success runs on, you need the austerity. And so you can see from this graph, the states from 65 to 2017, the level of federal investment. So essentially, we're just barely above 1967 at this point. We've just evened it out. We've never gone anywhere since 1967. So those are the prime conditions for private investment. And that's going to be work-based, youth employment, companies, corporations combining work and badging and education so that they can cream their employees and groom them and take sort of the best kids out of the system. This is actually an event that happened in Philadelphia in 2018. When I was doing my research into Brazil and impact investing, I was kind of flabbergasted to actually find that this Global Opportunity Youth Program had kids from Brazil coming to Philadelphia. And they were in this co-working space that I remember attending a meeting where I was interrogating our state education commissioner about impact investing, which is crazy. I'm looking at this video going, I recognize that space. It's called The Hive. Surprise, surprise. This co-working space, The Hive. I'm like, I've been there. I've yelled at the guy in there. So, and it's global. They've got kids from all over the world. It's special. These are, teens and young people, and they're brought in. And of course, it's in Philadelphia. It's the Aspen Institute. You can see the logo. It's Prudential. It's Youth Build International, and Youth Build has a big presence here as well. So this is the Opportunity Youth. They're global. Of course, all roads lead back to Philadelphia and impact investing. And what I want to say is, we've talked before about the gaming and the storytelling and the weaponized narrative. And so the storytelling is huge. And they want to groom these change agents to go back to their home countries and sell this idea, right? And this is a report from March of 2021. Again, the Aspen Institute. They're going to advance youth voice. We hear a ton of stuff about advancing youth voice, advancing the youth. The youth are our future. It's the youth are a future, but they're generally disconnected from their community. And we just want to have them over here in a little pile so we can groom them and pat them on the back and tell them how to be and reinforce their identity within the construct that we've created, okay? So the narrative is important. This is part of the report. And they talk about, tell your story, heal through your stories, change the public narrative. We're going to really center your experience. And the question is, does anyone really think the people in charge of the Aspen Institute, other than maybe the people who have to run this program, care? really are like going to fundamentally change how they treat the world. Like they're not going to build cyborg avatar capitalism because the kids say that it hurts them to do virtual world, living in a virtual world. No, but they're going to go through the motions to try to frame these kids that their story matters, because the idea that they think their story matters is important. So they go through the motions. And again, I just touched on Greta. Again, they want to separate the youth from the community. They want to uplift youth voice. They want to uplift the naivety of youth, because they are pawns in this overall system of power. Like, I don't want to say that they're totally have no autonomy, but they don't have the life experience in reality. And so again, as we talk about consent, youth consent and informed consent and youth work and all of these things, like it has to be understood within this broader context of global systems of power and domination. Like you can't expect a teenager to go up against social impact investors and have the level of sophistication to really call out their shit, in my opinion. And the system is built up to reward the people who go along. And it's hard, you know. Prudential Foundation was one of the funders. Again, Prudential was working with social finance on career impact bonds. So they're going to reskill all the people who were put out of work because of COVID. So they're not a disinterested party. They're a funder of Third Sector. Third Sector is the organization that was connected by George Overholtzer that essentially laid the foundation work and all the seed projects for Pay for Success Finance. So, you know, that's Prudential. Youth Build was one of the stakeholders at that event. They're working on social impact bonds. There's a social impact bond that was being piloted out from Monterrey in Mexico, again, like targeting Mexico for this. And they want the youth to have work readiness and skills. So it's the skill building, and we're going to talk more about that later. But Youth Build is not a disinterested party. It's about grooming kids for impact investing. One of the programs that participated, and again, you can see that, you know, the inaugural Global Opportunity Youth Convening in 2018 at the Hive, of course, in Philadelphia. So one of the organizations that was represented is Anudeep and iMerit. Okay, so I've actually had this organization and Radha Basu, their CEO, on my radar for a long time because she's a key person in the impact investing space around machine learning. And they actually are targeting primarily India, but also they have a program in New Orleans, which is, again, a targeted community in many ways. And so what this organization does is it trains children, it trains young people, I'll say opportunity youth. So it's that late teen, early 20s demographic for digital jobs. It's the digital job building, and they contract with many very wealthy and influential tech companies. And they can do that because they can like pay people not that much money to do this work. And what they need is they need a lot of data analytics. Now here it says that their alumna came in, of course they talked about 3D printed prosthetic hands because that's what's cool. But really what Radha Basu is about data analytics and cleaning up data for autonomous vehicles and machine learning. So iMerit is the organization. Again, Radha Basu started out in call centers and then moved into automation. And this is what I say, they're getting the opportunity youth to build it. Her company is backed by CDC Group. That's not the CDC's Centers for Disease Control. It's the UK Global Development Aid Group. Khosla Impact Investing, Omidyar Network, and the Dell Foundation. And we know Dell goes back to Austin. So there's these connections. And I've often wanted to actually do a conversation with Deepti about this dynamic with Radha Basu and the connections between Texas and tech and India. But iMerit, they're growing by leaps and bounds. And they're like, oh, we're growing even more with the pandemic because all of it is about data analytics. So you can see the details for what work they do. It's all about inclusion. They're doing AI, computer vision, image recognition, machine learning, natural language processing. So they'll lift up and they'll talk about sophisticated jobs, but a lot of it is really, I think, sort of digital sweatshop kind of work. And they're working towards this natural language processing, which is what they need to get to the point that they can do this seamless integration, right? And it says the company drives social and economic change by tapping into an under-resourced talent pool and creating digital inclusion. It has over 50% women. So again, it's that UN SDG Goal 5, like the gender equity. So again, you brought my attention to this today a little bit, like the IBM, the cognitive computing and dark data. And this is what I think is really important to understand about interoperable data and data standards is we're moving from a time in which there's all of this noisy data out there that is disconnected to wanting to have interoperable data that they can get these keener insights for machine learning and for the cognitive computing. And so I think really the metaverse and blockchain is about that. But in the meantime, these folks are cleaning up the noisy data and trying to make it useful for uses like, machine learning and autonomous vehicle stuff. And here's Radha Basu. Again, she started out at Hewlett-Packard. She had her whole career there. Then she moved into impact investing. She started Santa Clara University as Gavin Newsom's. He went there. He's an alum of Santa Clara. It's a Jesuit school. They have a social innovation space, and she developed the Frugal Innovation Lab, right? So these people don't even get high-end innovation. They just get the cheap the shoebox version of frugal, right? Innovation. But even with frugal, you can make a ton of money, right? And you can go to the Vatican, and you can go to the Vatican Impact Investing Conference. So I think this one was the 2018 conference, not the one Tom Steyer was at. But it's a global program, right? And Hewlett-Packard, again, this is where she came out of. And if you understand what Hewlett-Packard is about, Hewlett-Packard remade nonprofits for impact investing and is tied with biometric surveillance in Gaza and has done a lot of stuff. So that little Hewlett-Packard Chromebook they send home with your kids to do online school has a lot of baggage with it. And a lot of that is about, once they get older, is getting the opportunity youth at the impact as an impact investment to code the metaverse and train the AI. So this is about world skills. And early on, one of the things that really shocked me, and I should put a link to that probably again to Global Education Futures Forum and Pavel Laksha, who is in Russia. He was talking about the future of education, and really his foresight map just lays out exactly what's happening. So I was just following along. He is also connected to the World Skills Institute, the Russian category of it, and he's done an atlas of emerging jobs and new skills, and he's connected with Tom Vander Ark, who's the Gates Foundation guy and EdTech venture capitalist. And so this is his new atlas of emerging skills for the world, and the skills they're talking about are big data analytics, robotics, Internet of Things, big data for agriculture, new communication through visual, gesture, and thought, and activist art. And soft skills. So these are all of the skills that they want to groom the children into. So it's not like the kids' GPS can say I don't want any of those choices. Those choices don't do it for me. Actually, I find those choices problematic. Those are the choices that they're going to steer everyone into. All roads are going to go into these few choices.
Well, the activist art one is kind of interesting because, I don't think of activist art as an industry, it kind of ties the concept of activism with business, which is interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's NFTs, right? It's content creation. It's the narrative storytelling. Someone has to keep telling the story that will make people go along with it. And the more the world doesn't make sense, they're going to be grasping at stories for someone to tell them a story that helps make sense and helps them get up. You know what I mean? And that's what the art and culture community is about. And I have a follow-up that I want to do with you on social prescribing and the co-optation of the arts community, because some of the most hardcore institutions are arts and culture institutions, are the museums, are the theaters, are all of the places. They're the ones who are demanding, show me your papers, to access arts and culture. And it's because they got taken over by the impact investors and they're held hostage now.
Yeah.
And maybe they've convinced themselves that that's okay. So this is just Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act again, this is a managed workforce, but again, it's not a Chinese communist managed workforce. It's a U.S. Chamber of Commerce managed workforce to benefit the ones who are already in charge of the economy. And that the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is intrinsically linked with pay for success finance and results-based financing, which is going to be about training your human capital to do what you want it to do based on this GPS system on blockchain. And this is just ours, like the Philadelphia Works, the workforce innovation. I told you before, the jobs are crappy that they're going to give people. You're not going to be able to live on them. It's going to they're going to have to interface with UBI or some sort of supportive housing or wraparound services because people simply won't be able to live on the wages that are offered. But where it says they're an integrated workforce system to meet the needs of businesses and job seekers, that's what they're trying to tell you with the blockchain GPS. But integrated workforce simply means we're going to slot you in there at the cheapest price. And the Federal Reserve System, at least in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Federal Reserve has been hand in hand with that planning out the workforce. And a lot of it has to do with infrastructure for Metaverse and telecommunication installation and stuff like that. And I guess the thing that just makes me the most mad on all of this of the future of work is that nobody tells you this moonshot goal project, right? There's this little arrow of I don't know. I guess that's actually medicine. I thought it was a factory, but now that I realize it, it's like a hospital factory with machines on the people in the hospital beds, which is crazy. But this is the future of work that they're imagining with your Go Anywhere cybernetic avatar. And that's the future of work that they want to imagine for people. And nobody knows it. I guess you kind of do, but they're trying to convince people that this is normal and okay. And you could maybe convince a 4-year-old it's okay. You could maybe convince an 11-year-old. I don't know. It depends on how much you can corrupt their mind and limit their access to the real world. But this is, again, why the stuff that we're saying about digital child labor matters, because the future of work goes to this.
That last segment, augmented body, cognition and perception for a fulfilling life. That's just that's just chilling.
I know, and I keep saying, I don't want to have to talk about this stuff. I don't want people to have thought this stuff up, but for whatever reason I have, and I have to, so. Skills. I hate skills. Skills is one of my least favorite words. We can just 21st century skills. Where did this come from? Again, this is where my education stuff comes back to haunt me. I was dealing with this skill stuff for a long time. The Partnership for 21st Century Skills, it goes back about 20 years, right? Founded in 2001. P21 is this organization that catalyzes education to work with business to ensure, this new future. And at the time, nobody really understood that was cyborg avatar capitalism. This is just from the California Department of Education website, but it does sort of lay out the timing. So 2001. And then what are the skills? What are 21st century skills? Well, if you understand that education is about the AI learning you, they really want the soft skills, this sort of BS that, you need to learn to talk to people so you can collaborate. No, they really want you on a device so that they can learn how to be human. So they're talking about collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. And it's really creepy later when they start talking about how they use psychometrics to try to track creativity. That's in some of these World Bank assessment elements, is how they use gamification to identify creativity. But citizenship, character, compassion, civics, life and career, all of these things, that's what they want to capture in the game. One of the key people here, and just so you know that it's not just the United States, this is global. I entered this in Little Sis a number of years back, and when I keep thinking about digital serfdom, I keep thinking about this organization because I think it actually dates to the late 19th century, the City and Guilds Group, and it's skills training. And I think part of what's so hard about this is that because of the cost of higher education and because of the glamorization of higher education, there's been a preparing the way for the past 5 to 10 years for career and technical education to say not everybody has to go to college. Vocational training is super great. I can't remember what's the dirty jobs guy? Dirty jobs are great and whatever. And I'm not saying that they're not, but this was done in a very intentional way so that people imagine that the future of skills is hands-on work. That when you do career and technical education, that means that you're going to go to a automotive, like you're going to have a school district that has an automotive area and you're going to learn how to be a mechanic or whatever. And it's not that. Like that's not, and it's misleading how they represent it to people. Like the new futures of technical education is going to be in a virtual reality headset, and it's going to be that way because they need to get the data with fidelity and they don't actually want you to do the job. So the City and Guilds group goes back to the late 19th century. This guy, Simon Bartley, is with the World Skills. He was on their executive committee for a long time. And you can see how it connects with open badges and digital me, which is the digital identity. So this is in the UK, and Credly, which is all of the online badging. Again, there's Simon Bartley. He's the president of World Skills. World Skills, they have a lot of different divisions. They have these online competitions. World Skills Europe, World Skills London. He's like gone through the whole track. This is a website from the World Skills page. They have annual competitions for skill building, and you can see the global premium partners include Samsung, right? So we went out to Samsung, right? So these are the people building the semiconductor chips and the metaverse. Like this is where this goes. This is South Korea. This is the metaverse, and you're building your skills, but your skills are to live in the metaverse as a cyborg. In the US, so the OECD, again, this is global. This was developed by this guy, Charles Fidel. He is connected to Harvard. They're redesigning curriculum for these 21st century skills. How can you prepare them for a global economy? And again, they know that the global economy means gig work given out by AI based on your social credit rating and your metadata from pre-K. They know that. And Cisco is like the sponsor. This dates back to 2008. Like, who else are some of these members of these Partnership for 21st Century Skills? No huge surprise, right? It's technology companies, the NEA, the National Education Association, so that one of the teachers' unions is in there. But, and I've talked a lot about Sesame Street and how problematic Sesame Street is. But you've got Hewlett-Packard, you've got AT&T, you've got Apple, you've got Dell, you've got Verizon, Cisco, cable in the classroom. You talked about getting the TVs in the classroom. Well, that's broadband. Eventually that's Wi-Fi. This is 2008, remember, so it's not quite as far along, but all of this is about getting education digital so that you can measure it, so that you can condition kids for this new version. Pearson Learning is in there, Oracle, Microsoft. One of the ones I will point out later is Lego. Lego is a huge problem in this space. And moving forward, this is the week for School Choice Week. And what we have to know is that they're going to push these digital vouchers on blockchain. And then so a lot of the online education modules and kit-based toy companies and learning kit companies like Legos and Lego Robotics will start to move into this space as soon as there are digital vouchers to be like, hey, you can buy a Lego kit and earn a badge, right? Take a picture of it, do a video, connect it online to this computer coding system. And that is what Lego is doing. So these Lego robotics leagues that have been setting up the battle space with militarized soldiers with all of their after school programs for robotics is now going to move into like home-based at your kitchen table. And I will point out KnowledgeWorks is a central player in this as well. So who is leading the Partnership for 21st Century Skills? It's this guy. His name is Ken Kay. Ken Kay was actually the director of something called the Computer Systems Policy Project, which was a lobbying group for technology companies. It was a very select group at the time. This is in like the early 2000s, the most elite technology companies. And he was a very key player in that space. And then he was a lobbyist for the Podesta Group. And then he was connected in with what's like, we're moving towards stuff like project-based learning. He was on the board of the Buck Institute. And once you understand that the wearable technology and the video game capture and the digital badging can be connected through the project-based learning, it all starts to make more sense. Like back in 2015, when I was first learning about this, I didn't understand about the impact data verification and how it could happen with projects through video technology and other things on blockchain, but that's pretty clearly moving forward. North Dakota, he was a presenter at this education summit, proficiency-based education, and it turns out Learning Economy is working with the state of North Dakota to do the first mastery transcript program. So like in the state of North Dakota, the governor was former Microsoft guy, Doug Burgum. He sold his accounting company to Microsoft and got really rich. And in North Dakota, they were saying that the model was that they didn't want high school juniors or seniors to even be in school. They should all be out doing work-based learning what like they didn't want to do. But at the same time, they said that they needed things like high level physics. Now, what high school kid in North Dakota is going to go to some random work-based learning project and learn physics? Like, it's not going to happen. Like, there's a lot of disconnects, but, Ken Kay is very central. Eventually he stepped back from the Partnership for 21st Century Learning. It blended with something called Ed Leader 21, and actually it was affiliated later with Battelle, which is a defense contractor, right? And so this was the thing I started to realize is that Battelle was also funding, I believe, Playworks, and that they were doing character building and they were tracking all of the soft skills data. And it was all being fed into sort of the defense technology space. There's a link if people want to look it up. Digital Promise, so digital education has been in there. Karen Cater for a long time. Stefan Turnipseed, which is a kind of a crazy last name. He was the chief strategy officer for this Pitsco Education, which I think was in Kansas City, which was a robot kit company. But then it turns out that after that, he was for years the lead strategic strategic partnerships guy for Lego North America. So he was setting things up with Lego. This whole time he was connected with the Partnership for 21st Century Skill Building. And then Fidel, like he was the one who had written the thing about skills building in the OECD, pushing mastery transcripts. So that's a transcript of all your skills. He was part of a project called Machine and Human Learning. So this collaborative learning, like we're learning, but it's really the machine learning us. And the Center for Curriculum Redesign, which is essentially about remaking what education is for the 21st century. And a lot of that he did as a visiting scholar at Harvard Graduate School of Education, which is at the center of a lot of this. And he was the global lead for Cisco Systems Global Education for like 12 years too. So it's all about, letting technology take over our children. Like that's what it's about. And it's about the human capital and it's about the machine learning. So this is the thing about Pavel Leksha, like he's the skills guy. This is from one of his slide shares. He's talking about current trends. This is from 2010. Even in 2010, he's talking about the totality of digital reality blurring online and offline worlds and the transformations of social reality, meaning that we have social innovation and social superstructures. Like we don't really even know what our society is anymore. And that they're transforming roles of corporations, governments, and communities, meaning like to me, that just blends it all together. Like, welcome to your mega blockchain overlord, DAO, kind of thing. This is the thing about Lego that I wanted to point out that was really upsetting to me is that Learning Economy Foundation that's connected with the World Bank. This blog post was from December 21st, 2021. So not that long ago. And I guess it's actually on the Lego Foundation website now that I think about it, that they've partnered with Learning Economy. And again, they go way back to with MIT Media Lab, funding MIT Media Lab from the very beginning, developing a wallet, a digital wallet for children to store their digital records of their learning. And again, you see self-sovereign. So this sovereignty discussion, this use of sovereignty language is a real problem. That children will be self-sovereign educational credentialing systems in miniature. I guess that's a minifig, right? Your minifig education system, right? So this Super Skills app, which is a mobile phone-based app, and they're pitching it with this digital wallet. And they're talking about this strong branding that Lego is the 7th strongest brand in the world. So this is all done with very clear intention. That gamified learning apps where you track your achievements in a digital wallet is something that is going to be normalized. And that the Lego Foundation there, you can see this is just a tweet, but it is they work with UNICEF and it's connected to, you can see SDG 4, United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 4 is education. And most of that is happening through digital learning. And this is from a Google Groups, but this is the guy who's like beta testing it, and this is from January 12th. And they're talking. He's saying that he's working with Learning Economy and Lego to have this app to foster holistic skills, right? Because nothing says education like a little boy sitting on a dirt pile playing with a phone, right? They just want it holistic, meaning they want everything. And they're targeting children 6 to 12. And then they've got these gamified apps. So it talks about, and they're interested in finding content partners, right? Creative content partners, right? And so, hey, if you're interested, like email this, C Reynolds at whatever to figure it out, because they're super excited about creating their Lego digital wallet to track 6-year-olds. And this is the game, right? So welcome to your future of education, the future of work, the future skills, Super Skillsville. Like they can't actually come up with a better title than Super Skillsville. And they've got this idea already of pathways, right? Your GPS. We've got the pathway, you follow the path. You find the treasure, you do this. Like here is your book of adventures, choose. But the only choices you have are the choices we've already programmed into the system. And I would say, so the first two are gamification. And again, this gets back to like, well, why would it be a problem for kids to get paid by doing video games for things they like? Well, because it feeds into the Lego Foundation Human Capital Digital Economy, Human Capital Finance Metaverse program. But the last one, I will just say this third image is paper airplanes, earn physical skill resources, right? I don't even know what that means, you're earning resources, but learn how to build a paper plane. So there's clearly a video. It looks like, well, I don't know exactly how long this video is. It says it's a 30 to 60 minute time frame for one player. So you're not supposed to actually do it with anyone. Ages 2 to 6. So on this one, like you could be 2 years old and they're giving you a badge. It's crazy. Like it's insanity. And yeah, it's truly happening, right? Why am I like the only one who sees this and realizes it's a problem? But like, since it's a video, like how would you earn the skill? Like there's probably some content you absorb in that course of 30 to 60 minutes, and then you demonstrate it, right? Like you've got a phone and you'll have to take a video or something to earn the badge to get it in your digital locker. So yeah, Super Skillsville. Welcome to your future education, teachers, because it's all your fault for going along. I'm so mad at you right now.
Well, I'm just interested in the treasure chest. That's all I want is the treasure.
Trillions in treasure. We're saving them trillions in treasures. If the children could just navigate Super Skillsville, we'll never have a public health crisis again. And so this is the other piece. I think I actually couldn't find the original paper, but some of this, because again, I got into this space fighting standardized testing and the use of the data from standardized testing to close public schools. And so within this space, like I never quite understood how quickly it was going to pivot to project-based learning in the panopticon with wearable video technology for impact metrics in gamified stuff, but it did. And the MacArthur Foundation is one of the central players in digital media and learning, and they had been pushing stealth assessments through gaming to be like, oh, the kids won't be so stressed out because like they won't know when they're being tested or when it really counts, as opposed to like you're going to stress them all the time to teach them education is just being in a digital panopticon. But I couldn't find the paper, the MacArthur Foundation paper that they funded. I think it actually was published through the MIT Media Lab. They have like a whole series of digital media and learning papers. But this is by a guy, Richard Landers from the University of Minnesota, and it's an introduction to game-based assessment, measuring knowledge, skills, ability, and other human characteristics using behaviors observed in games. And so again, like just think back to that digital gaming Skillsville thing with Lego. What psychometric data are they capturing? And I will even say, like within one of the World Bank video games that we talked about, like there was a woman from ETS, Educational Testing Service, who was like, sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes the way we set up the games aren't measuring the thing we measure. Like sometimes there are problems like setting up these blockchain identity badges where everything is permanent. there's problems with, we should be very careful. Like, I have to give her credit. Like, granted, it's her job and she's done it for 15 years, but she's like, we don't always really know what we're doing when we develop these metrics, that they're actually measuring what we think they're measuring. And so now they're really focused on soft skills and psychometrics and behavior so that the AI could slot you into your gig job, right? Potentially that going back to preschool, going back to your Lego game, right? Like, beware before you give the kid the Lego wallet. Everything counts. We can track everything. Learning happens everywhere. And, the elf on the shelf is watching, like, that's what it feels like. And just because it's a game doesn't make it nice. It doesn't make it nice at all. So anyway, that's part of that, psychometrics. Mastery transcripts and blockchain Mindfiles. So here's Tom Vander Ark on the left and Pavel Leksha on the right. And, this is a fairly recent episode, 10 months ago. Tom Vander Ark, they were both part of Global Education Futures Forum. They were both pushing competency-based education. Pavel's come out with his new skills atlas, and they're all super excited to talk about it. Now, Tom Vander Ark was originally hired. He created the first state-level virtual school in Washington State. He was a high-level program officer for the Gates Foundation. He later became a venture capitalist in the ed tech space. Okay, so, and he has this, Getting Smart podcast, and he has his own venture capital funds, and he's very connected. So he and Pavel are talking skills, the future of skills, right? Skills of Skillville, all right? So the thing about Pavel Leksha that was super creepy, and I didn't really know what to make of it when I first encountered him in 2015 after seeing this crazy Foresight map, talking about student genetic passports and virtual prisons and virtual reality and all this stuff, was that this is I would encourage you to look at his slide share. This is from 2014, and it's called NeuroWeb, Enacting Our Transhumanist Future. So Pavel, who is connected with Skolkovo in Russia, the Silicon Valley of Russia, and the School of Management and all sorts of things, is also a transhumanist, right? So it's not just about skills, it's about skills towards the singularity. I put the link here on this. This is the Selfish Ledger. I've given a blog post about this recently around sort of yelling at the Chicago teachers unions for not getting their act together about Google Classroom and get back to school. But the Selfish Ledger, this is a video that is produced by Google. But essentially the idea is that the Selfish Ledger is blockchain. And what they're doing is each person has their own ledger of their life. And over time, the ledger wants to know every single thing about you. And so if there's a bit of data that it doesn't have, it figures out some item that it can use to extract that data based on what it's already in the ledger, and it will 3D print it, and it will figure out what price point you'll pay for it, and then it will mail it to you. So it will get that bit of data until your digital twin is fully fleshed out. And so the Selfish Ledger, and their idea is essentially, I think it's a transhumanist concept, and this is, again, it's being asserted by Google Alphabet, is that there will be intergenerational knowledge sharing and mind uploads, that there will be substrate independent minds called Sims, and that those will move forward, and that this is a transhumanist program. And we're already in some ways building substrate independent minds with our digital footprint, only at this point it's not all interoperable. And what they most want is for it to get interoperable so that messy, noisy, dark data isn't a problem. So it's all tidy. And then eventually they can put out of work all of the opportunity youth in India who are cleaning up the data, right? They don't need those people. It's all already on blockchain and it's seamless.
When we use contemporary technology, a trail of information is created in the form of data. When analyzed, it describes our actions, decisions, preferences, movement, and relationship. This codified version of who we are becomes ever more complex, developing, changing, and deforming based on our actions. In this regard, this ledger of our data may be considered a Lamarckian epigenome, a constantly evolving representation of who we are. What if the ledger could be given a volitional purpose rather than simply acting as an historical reference? What if we focused on creating a richer ledger by introducing more sources of information? What if we thought of ourselves not as the owners of this information, but as custodians, transient carriers, or caretakers? Initially, the notion of a goal-oriented ledger may be user-driven. As an organization, Google would be responsible for offering suitable targets for a user's ledger. Whilst the notion of a global good is problematic, topics would likely focus on health or environmental impact to reflect Google's values as an organization. Once the user selects a volition for their ledger, every interaction may be compared to a series of parallel options. If one of these options allows the ledger to move closer to its goal, it will be offered up to the user. Over time, by selecting these options, the user's behavior may be modified and the ledger moves closer to its target. As this line of thinking accelerates and the notion of a goal-driven ledger becomes more palatable, suggestions may be converted not by the user, but by the ledger itself. The ledger could be given a focus, shifting it from a system which not only tracks our behavior, but offers direction towards a desired result.
How are you getting all of these skills? We talked a little bit about career and technical education, about work-based learning. Apprenticeships are going to be a huge piece of opportunity youth and disconnected youth, right? Let's get you into an apprenticeship and we'll put you on the pathway. So this is apprenticeship.gov, and they're like saying, of course, like with the pandemic, well, now we'll do it remotely, and I will say, like, I'm really grateful because my kid who did a co-op program in college, like they just finished it, and some of it was remote work, but actually a fair bit of it was in person. But I can't imagine what it would be like to be a young person being groomed to do permanent telepresence work where your apprenticeships are all virtual. But that is what is being normalized here. And it's not just going to be in the opportunity sector. It is connected to K-12 education, and it is, again, linked to Pay for Success finance. You can see JFF, that's Jobs for the Future. So Jobs for the Future in Social Finance, which is Ronald Cohen, which is a human capital finance impact investing, are exploring using Pay for Success in CTE, career technical education, in K-12, right? So they're already looking to push it back, not just for disconnected, but fully into the educational program. Now, we know that U.S. Department of Education was part of that Learning Economy World Bank participation, blockchain participation program. And here you see, this is a competition from 2017 that social finance and Jobs for the Future were already started. And some of the first Pay for Success finance seed funding after the Every Student Succeeds Act passed were for job training. So this Jobs for the Future, like they want project-based learning so that they can get the soft skills data and that they can get the skills badging data to run the impact systems. Again, it's insanity, right? Here we're doing workforce training through virtual reality, right? And it goes back. I mean, it goes back to that cyborg avatar capitalist imagery, which is so cartoonish and crazy. And again, I have to believe this isn't going to work. Like they won't be able to scale it. And then some of this is just smoke and mirrors. But why are we going along? Like, we have to resist this narrative. We have to resist this. This is from November of 2020. And knowing that like the virtual reality is just sucking the biometrics out of your soul while it's going. It's not a one way. It's not just you consuming content. It's consuming you. They want to link the VR to XAPI. We've talked about that before. The badging system, we can track it, the noun, verb, object statements. And those go back. This is the GitHub stuff, but it goes pretty far back. Aaron Silver's, this is 2013, okay? It's a competency model, and this all needs to be standardized. They're moving towards mastery transcripts. Now, they're very sneaky about this because they're doing it with elite private schools so that everyone will demand to have them. It's like, oh, the private schools have them, so we want to have them. 100 Academy, this is an entity, I think it's actually out of Finland, that scores all sorts of ed tech systems, and they're calling, this is the Mastery Transcript Initiative, that they're tracking microcredits. Now that gamification thing with the paper planes, that's called micro learning, and that's part of this personalized learning assistant, the militarized stuff that goes back to the Office of Naval Research. You do a micro learning game, you earn a microcredit, and it's going to signify a block on your transcript. And increasingly, it talks about habits of mind. So they want the social skills, and it's very much about the soft skills data. And I know that there's increasingly a lot of concern around social emotional learning in the schools, but often, unfortunately, in my mind, it's connected to the critical race theory, that people think that it's about grooming people around a certain political outlook, which in my mind, the critical race theory piece is very much about impact investing and using engineering people of color, people, different language learners or whatever into these impact spaces. But the social emotional learning is very much about getting the soft skills for the AI training is tied to the impact space. And it's frustrating to me somewhat that this habits of mind, that people don't understand it both as part of the financial human capital betting system and then also part of the AI machine learning system.
Well, that's just weird. It's a weird phrasing, habit of mind. Like I'm trying to wrap my mind
But
around
it's training.
what that means. Yeah.
I think it's like creating a groove. So you don't have to think about it anymore. You just do it. And it's engineering. I mean, that's what Norbert Wiener was about from the very beginning. He was about programming the animal and Skinner. So again, I've showed this image before, but I think it's just very useful. Again, who are we trying to take care of? Like that's a preteen kid, right? Being trained to run an Amazon warehouse thing. And they're going to be sold that it's super exciting and disruptive to have this VR headset on, but they're training low wage gig work. And they're doing it that when I say the headset takes the data, these are both from a slide share from JCA Solutions, which is based in Orlando, which is a defense contractor, and much of the simulation industry. There's quite a bit in the Research Triangle area. There's a lot, especially the military defense side in Orlando. And within the VR headset and the haptics, they're capturing all of this data, motion, biometrics, eye focus, audio, heart rate, where you're looking, all of it. And that's all data that's supposed to go into your learning locker if you get the badge. And in this case, the slideshare talks about the competency, the micro skill that you learn is how to pet a dog properly. So they have these steps that you have to show to demonstrate that you know how to properly pet a dog that you don't know. And then if you do all the steps and you submit compliance, again, there's no creativity involved. It's simply like, can you learn what we demand you know, and will you repeat it exactly the way we say? And it's a military, it's a chain of command. It's not a creative educational, like, can you create your own reality? Can you come up with other ideas? It's, will you comply to this? And then all of that metadata, as Charles Hoskinson says, like we're aligned with the government and we know if you're worthy of having a job. This is the American Council on Education. This is a fairly recent document, I think. It's connected impact, so it's unlocking educational workforce through the blockchain, right? So the blockchain is the key piece of the interoperability. I find it's kind of creepy that the woman's like got the projection on her brain, like her brain is just interfaced and she's super professional. Of course, it's a woman of color because that's part of the impact investing space. Everything needs to be on blockchain. There's a clip from Institute for the Future. They have this video, Learning is Earning, which is all about blockchain and getting paid to learn and getting paid for skills acquisition. And there's a smaller video with this woman called Olive, and she's sitting in a cafe trying to decide about which new courses she's going to take, if she's taking virtual reality programming or Chinese, and that all of it will be put on blockchain. And she's weighing the thing because like once she signs up for the course, someone will invest in her. And then assuming she gets work, then that her wages will be garnished moving forward through an income sharing agreement. And this is something that has already been advanced through Purdue Baca-Boiler's system. And this is all going to run on blockchain. And literally Arizona State University and Global Silicon Valley, like they've had panel discussions about this where they have an online securitization platform called Edley, where they're going to securitize the income sharing agreements. And again, I mentioned a little bit earlier about the state of New Jersey and that they were involved in career impact bonds with social finance, and that they were having people not only finance their reskilling, because it's not just college kids now, it could be middle-aged people who've been locked down out of their jobs, that they would be financing through income sharing agreements, not only their tuition, but also all their social services. So like you would have to like self-finance your childcare, like while you were doing the reskilling. And my big concern is that all of this is going to be baked into welfare to work. So if you need public assistance, you're going to be forced into these income sharing agreements. And so this Olive video talks about that. It talks about how the blockchain runs it. So not only is the blockchain storing all of your skill credentials and transcripts, it's also running the finance. And then Christopher Riccardi with Edley is they're going to securitize it all. And that's part of the, the new global game.
So you're logged into the ledger right now. Tell us what you're doing.
So I'm thinking about taking some courses to boost my ledger profile. Mandarin or virtual reality programming, I'm kind of torn. I can make a lot more money doing VR programming, but it's going to cost me a lot more to get my skills up to the level where people are going to hire me. On the other hand, there are a lot of Mandarin translating gigs, even at my current level. And EduBlocks are cheap enough that I could pay for them myself. But I don't even know if it's worth it. The jobs don't pay that much, and honestly, virtual reality is my passion. So right now, I'm looking at investor offers. So here, you have someone who's willing to pay people like me to take a VR programming intensive course. The deal is, I have to give up 10% of my income for any VR programming that I log into the ledger for the next 5 years. What do you think? Should I do it?
So it gets worse. So like, as you know, like we're gonna head out to Salt Lake City in a bit and check out the Mormon Transhumanist Association is centering decentralization and blockchain for their annual conference. So part of this is this woman, Melanie Swan. And when I talk about substrate independent minds or SIMs, is literally like with the selfish ledger that they want to create mind files. And, she talks about these digital mind files or decentralized autonomous corporations or organizations, like literally your mind just becomes its own corporation. And isn't it great that children are sovereign because they can just be incorporated and like just sell themselves through income sharing agreements on the market for tokens while they're turned into mind files to upload for consciousness, right? But literally this is this concept, and she is very connected. She has a very long publication record where she's talking about here, what does it say? The next stage is enabling the digital U file, initially for guided operations and with expanding levels of approved autonomy. Great. So depending on your Lego digital wallet, you have more autonomy. Digital U files could earn economic sustenance with online projects, construct administrative activities, find information, and have experiences to resync with U prime later. So literally they're talking about your digital twin is like going out and doing stuff and earning money without you being connected to it and then resyncing with you. And like, and I know it seems so fringy, but these people are connected to powerful people. It'd be like digital mind files could just be like any other smart contract running on the blockchain with checks and balances. Come on, it's perfect libertarianism. Mind files, free market mind files. We could make some money on that, I'm sure, with friendly AI. And the crazy thing is, like, I actually had this exchange with someone on Twitter. Like, he was trying to figure this stuff out, and he was like a co-founder of Minds.com. And when I looked up what Minds.com was, it was literally a blockchain social media platform, like a blockchain internet kind of thing. And I was like, I shared the Melanie Swan stuff, and I'm like, you realize, like, your name of your organization is this, Minds.com, your mind as a corporation. It's a mind file. And like, I still don't think they know this. And I just don't understand, like, how do you create this blockchain social media thing called Minds.com and no one ever told you about a mind file upload? So this is the conference. We're going to try to, and like Tamika Tilleman, like he's keynoting, right? And he's someone who developed ESG investing and blockchain investing parameters for New America Foundation, which is largely funded by Eric Schmidt, Google Alphabet, like, and how's this happen, right? Like, if it's not, like, this seems to be running out the gate when you have like former high-level State Department officials who are running like global third way think tanks, setting up global impact investing on blockchain to keynote the Mormon transhumanist thing, which is connected to mastery transcripts, mind files, and brain uploading in the selfish ledger. But that's what it seems to me. So I guess we'll find out. I'm looking into blockchain digital twinning. Clearly Melanie Swan already has this on her radar. This is a paper, I think it's fairly recent. I have the link. Yeah, September 2021. So they're doing research trends and future challenges for digital twinning. And again, it's global, right? You've got Estonia, Russia, Australia, UAE, and South Korea. So that covers a lot of territory. I mean, there's nobody from the US, but they're really, like, for the most part, people who are imagining digital twinning, they're like, oh, we're just going to digitally twin engines or cars or smart cities or traffic systems. But like the end game is the Mindfile game and you know, and the ethics of what that is. So again, this is just back to the Lego Foundation and their Super Skills mobile application. Choose your own adventure. Literally, Jason, they just said the same thing I just said. It's a choose your own adventure game where you earn resources, restore an ancient town and level up while developing foundational skills to be a lifelong learner on the blockchain. So yeah, that's where we're going. Like, that's going fast forward. It's going very quickly. And they're talking about holistic skills. The skills they want are cognitive, creative, social, emotional, and physical. So literally these physical skills, they're going to have like kids with Fitbits and stuff. Like they're training, like this is Ender's Game. Like this really feels like this is an Ender's Game thing. And like, but we need for the people to realize that this is not in our best interest. This GPS for learning is not going anywhere we want to go. So here we've got blockchain, right? It's almost perfect. With their interlocking studs, Lego has long been a go-to analogy for explaining modular architectures and thin layered tech stacks, particularly in the emerging tech space of NFTs and blockchain. So it's almost like this whole blockchain thing goes back to Lego, right? And it's kind of crazy because I remember early on studying Finland because everyone was like, Finland in education. Everybody wants to be, it was kind of like Sweden in the COVID stuff. In the education space, everybody wanted to be like Finland because Finland was about project-based learning and play. Only I realized that actually Finland was working with Nordefco and the US military on digital badging and skills, and that their play was going to be connected to blockchain early on. And Valamis is the company that was part of that. And Valamis used the image of Legos in their imagery. And maybe I'll update this slide too so that you can have a picture of it. But this idea of NFTs on blockchain, the other thing that I haven't covered yet is in Lego, they're working with MIT Media Lab on something called Scratch, which is a block coding device, which is teaching kids to be content creators, like digital content creators, creating animations and story, again, narrative storytelling. Tell us your story so we can learn from you with the block coding. But again, the block coding, you can only tell the story with the bits that they give you. You can't tell a story with the bits that they don't give you. It's a choose your own adventure. They've decided what the options are. You can reorganize them. You can remix, and they encourage that. They have an online global community of kids who interact with it, which is, again, feeding the digital simulation. But I feel like Lego with Scratch, because they've got this interface somehow between Wi-Fi that connects with the coding, and they use a smart module on the Lego device, like for little robots. It's all blockchain. It's all like this very grotesque counterfeit virtualization of life that is fake. It's fake life. It's not real life. So, but anyway, the Lego goes back, NFTs and blockchain and content creation. Of course, it's all about evidence. So they're going to make you, record it on video so they could put it in your locker. And literally, this is what they call it: as the child trains useful skills, they are also equipping themselves with provable credentials for these skills, which can then be presented or exchanged digitally at a later time. So they're training children. They're not educating the children. They're training them for compliance, and they're giving them provable credentials in their Lego locker so that you can, I guess, upgrade to the adult version. This is NTNT. Digital twinning. Again, I would encourage you to click this link, the source link to the NTNT document, which was last year, about using your twin to manipulate you. And here they're actually acknowledging the ethics. They're saying, like, what are the ethical issues in changing or controlling the physical and psychological status of a human in the real world by manipulating the twin, right? So that's like literally straight up. This is Nippon Telegraph and Telephone working with Japan Science and Technology Agency's Moonshot project, which has the involvement of the National Science Foundation of the United States and the United States Department of Energy to build cyborg avatar capitalism. And they're already conjecturing this. And so I'm just trying to make this sense of like micro credentials, mastery transcripts, stackable skills, bit by bit, the selfish ledger, the digital twin, and then using your twin to run you backwards. It's really messed up. So this is the World Bank. So like, think about Jordan Larson, like think about this like virtual transmedia learning gaming, the World Bank Evoke. So they started this in 2010. This is part of these webinars. This was from the December 17th, 2020. This guy is with the World Bank and he's looking at the game mechanics. So they've started this transmedia learning video game for sustainability, all tied to impact investing and sort of like serious games, game changing in 2010. The World Bank gives Institute for the Future $500,000 to start a graphic novel and a video combination to consume this content. Then by 2020, they've revisited it several times and they're doing a pilot program in Colombia, the country in South America, tied to blockchain, where young college students do quests tied to the sustainability, smart city sustainability program. And if they do them successfully with an 80% passing score rate, they can earn tokens on blockchain that will get them cell phone points. And this is all tied with donors, right? So this isn't government funded. This is all tied. This is your free market libertarianism on steroids tied with the World Bank that's coming. Jane McGonigal was with Institute for the Future. She developed the game. She's kind of a creepy lady. And Institute for the Future is a RAND spinoff from the 60s. It's in the Bay Area. It's there to like set all of this up. But you know, she's talking about, this is from the World Bank seminar, and talking about all the different elements, you know, considerations, and that this game is about smart cities infrastructure. But these are elements that are in the foresight. She's a foresight person. So she's talking about automation of work, facial recognition and surveillance, virtual reality, blockchain, lifelong reskilling, universal basic income, cryptocurrencies, IoT, current pandemic and post-pandemic trauma. These are all the things that the futurists in Silicon Valley are prepping us for. Okay, homeschooling and unschooling. This is central to the school choice stuff in the Lego digital ID kit. This is a tweet. They're just talking about reimagining education. Again, gamification of 21st century skills. So this gamification goes back at least 20 years with Ken K and the technology power. Now it's all on blockchain. This is tied with Colombia. Again, there's a huge push for crypto in Latin America, a big push around getting the global unbanked into digital identity and getting them online, big pushes behind esports and other things. This is fairly recently, I think this was like last year. This was all unfolding in the pandemic. It was either 2020 or 2021. So here's an image. This is from the original game, and this is Jane McGonigal, and she's talking about it. The original pilot came out in South Africa, and it had a number of different quests. And you had a graphic design novel, and then you had online interactive content. And guess what? Some of the scenarios were pandemic. Can you imagine? Oh, look, pandemic in November 6, 2020 in China. The Pearl River flu. And they were all like chatting on the World Bank video about how unusual that was. Like, can you believe it? Like pandemic, right?
Evoke was a game played in 2010, set 10 years in the future, set in the year 2020. And so we are now living in the future that was forecast in that game. And it has kind of turned out to be uncannily accurate in terms of what you were forecasting. For example, you can see here one of the pages from the graphic novel that provided the essentially the textbook for this crash course in social innovation. You can see here it's November 2020, it's in China. They're talking about the first cases of the Pearl River flu, which were detected among migrant workers. One of the major challenges that we asked people in Evoke to think about how they would help solve was a respiratory pandemic, a global outbreak of a respiratory disease that started in China. We were also at the same time talking about potential problems in misinformation and disinformation campaigns. Another challenge that we were looking at, you can see here that story was playing out in September of 2020, was historic wildfires in California. And we had a whole episode about how that would impact people's health from breathing the wildfire smoke for extended periods of time, how it impacts economic security. And so it is kind of eerie to have woken up in the real 2020 and be living through exactly these kinds of intersections of crises.
So this is the World Bank guy again. He's just talking about the iterations that it was in South Africa, then it was in Brazil, then it was in Mexico. That theme was about food security, ironically. And then you've got South Africa again, looking at out of school youth. So that's the opportunity youth. And then by 2019, they want to prototype it. They're working with Consensus. Again, the name of the game is Evoke. So this is almost 10 years later, and they want to put it now on blockchain. So it's not just watching the game. And I think by that point they had like 170,000 kids play the game, but they're going to prototype it with blockchain. And the blockchain is connected to value exchange and transparency. And what the World Bank keeps talking about is results-based financing, and that a huge amount of their projects in their budgets because they use results-based financing are about getting the data. So what they're mostly about is creating cheap, scalable ways to get impact data to justify their results-based financing. And that's why it all has to be gamified on blockchain so they can get automatically at scale. They're awarding skills badges. They're tracking the social skills. They talk about the blockchain token rules. And in this game, like, they can make up whatever the rules, that they want, and that's part of the whole Ender's Game scenario, is the adults screw you over and change the rules and mess everything up just to keep you unstable. It's central to this is the donors. So again, this is setting up social impact investing, not from government-based accountable assistance, but that your participation comes at the behest of some outside donor. Among the donors, Telefonica donated the telephone minutes, which were the prizes, but Chemonics was another player in this. And and maybe I should link to this as well and just include a slide for it. My conditional cash transfer program analysis about Mexico is very central. The universal basic income that is coming is going to be tied to universal digital identity and blockchain. So this is conditional. You will obey. So Chemonics is pay for success finance. It's a broad beltway contractor since the 70s doing like US quote unquote development work. Here's a report they did on blended finance. It says they have an international center for private sector engagement. Imagine that, like setting this all up. This is from the report. They talk about pay for success and development impact bonds and results-based funding. So that, again, the gamification of education and the connection with blockchain, with skills and Mindfiles and social skills, but also being connected to narrative storytelling and transmedia learning that is fully propagandized, which in this case, the propagandization is around the Sustainable Development Goals and getting the youth to buy in and execute them. So this is just to show you the trajectory. This is a woman who is a former World Bank employee. She is now in education space. She is now an entrepreneur working on no-code gaming content creation and NFTs. So they're moving towards a future where less and less expertise is required to do the coding, to build the metaverse, and that it's going to be more and more intuitive with sort of seamless interfaces. And I think in order for the metaverse to get built, that's how it has to get built. Now, my concern in some of this is that the way they did with Duolingo, that they were doing back-end translations as people played the language learning games, the tutorial games, that they were like double dipping and getting value creation out of the work that the people were doing using the apps, that they may start to create video game designs in which people's participation in them creates the metaverse. Like this no-code gaming, is there some way that they could build that into a video game so as you play the game, you're actually building out the metaverse? And to me, that would be the logic of how you would do it, right? You would create gaming scenarios that would then self-perpetuate and build in as simple a way as possible at scale, and then also make money in human capital finance to do it.
Yeah, the first time I built a website, you had, back then you had to actually know a little bit of HTML. And so, I'd be looking up, oh, what's the code to do this or what's the code to do that? But now they have these plug and play things where whether it's on WordPress or Wix or whatever, it's just like these, you just grab the block. You don't need to know any code at all in order to build your website. You're like, oh, here's a block that does this. And you just throw it in there and you can add the text or whatever, add the image or whatever. So that's what it seems like no code is. It's like,
dumbing it down.
It's just, you don't really have to know anything it's like building, they give you the building blocks and then,
you can see at the bottom, anyway, they have a bunch of social impact stuff, like the games are social impact related. Like they're doing under our nonprofit arm, because they always have in the nonprofit arm, like the guy with the planned systems, like they were a charity, right? Like they're doing good stuff. They're doing games around reproductive health and climate change and Corona combat, COVID, and financial literacy and the opioid crisis. I mean, like, don't those sound like really crazy fun games, right? But it's all about feeding it into the impact markets. So anyway, this is just her with the gaming revolution for international development, because everybody knows that like people want to play World Bank video games, I guess. And here's just her expertise in the World Bank Group. For 11 years, she was an education specialist. So this shows you the way in which the finance and the education and the gaming space are intermeshed. So Arizona State was part of this project too. Surprise, surprise, Michael Crow in QTEL. They had, again, it talks about the pilot being launched in 2010 and Jane McGonigal being part of it, and that ASU had something called Project Hieroglyph, and they were hiring science fiction writers to create this fictional universe. And they talk about storytelling being an incredibly powerful tool. And yeah, it is. It's totally about propaganda, right? And it's militarized propaganda. And we have to understand it as such. And now it's militarized propaganda with Hollywood, with like cutting edge Hollywood and deep fakes and then synthetic people and, cognitive learning reinforcement feedback loops that put you into cybernetics and potentially have a digital twin out there somewhere running you, hopefully not yet. But like, we don't even know. And that's our reality, is that's what we're moving into. And Arizona State is a militarized university. So I'm going to talk just a bit about transmedia learning. So Elaine Rayborn, she's scared me for a long time since the education stuff. She works for Sandia National Labs. She's a transmedia learning specialist. She does time at the Advanced Distributed Learning Office in Orlando, the military simulation. And I just have her Google Scholar thing, but she works in the military simulation thing. And she talks about serious games and behavior manipulation and like how that all works. And of course, cultural signposts and community-based virtual environments. And these are all the things that are being baked into serious gaming and content creation and content consumption and networks of community interaction around all of it. And it's all feeding into the digital twin world. This is just from her, one of her slide shares. I would recommend people definitely look her up. She has a number of videos. I mean, you can see a similarity between Evoke and this interface. And what she talks about transmedia learning is that you have material across different platforms. You might have video, you might have graphic design, you might have screen-based content, geospatial, you may have primary materials, and that you create this narrative story that's woven together across platforms and you interact with it in different ways. So that's what transmedia learning is. But it looks very similar to Evoke. Now, what she says is that the goals of transmedia learning are measurable behavior change, right? And I think measurable is really key here, because we have to understand that the stuff that they're developing isn't just for the military, it's for all the human capital finance, and they want to measure it. They want to measure it with fidelity to get the impact metrics. And that the behavior change they're looking for can be physical, intellectual, or attitudinal, right? So imagine the Lego wallet with the little kids, the 6-year-old and the Fitbits, show us your, oh, this week you did this many jumping jacks. How many did you do next week? And the AI is always keeping track, because increasingly the stuff that's keeping track isn't even human. We want to scale that. And so they talk about scaling training for thousands of learners. But I don't think that what Elaine Rayborn is really talking about is limited to the military. I think in the future, in this Ender's Game kind of future, is that all of the children are going to be soldiers in the cyber warfare space in the metaverse. And they're going to have to be trained, and they're all going to be militarized in some way, whether they understand that way or not, if we don't change things. I mean, if you look at this is the stuff that came out of the Naval Research Center, PEARLS, this personal assistant for learning, and it's transmedia learning, and it's a device. It's a device-based. They talk about plug and play experiences. It has information on your goals, content, people, and can be personalized. And I think you have to look at that and see that this is the adult version of the Lego Skillsville game, right? Constructivist situated learning theory, right? And it's interesting because constructivism was a center for Seymour Papert, who was the constructivist who did AI training at MIT Media Lab. He was one of the founders at MIT Media Lab, and he collaborated with Lego. In fact, Lego endowed his chair at the MIT Media Lab, and he was a constructivist. He was in both education, like knowing how people learn, and in AI, because his goal was to train the AI. But to do that, you learn from children. So the children were teaching him how to teach the AI. And then now you've got a device that's learning you. It's like an inverted mirror. Self-regulated learning, right? Like it's the little boy on the hill. Watch videos. Now this is all about cybersecurity. Read blogs. Practice. Upload your progress to unlock new information. This is the leveling up. Play a serious game. Follow people on social media, share ideas or comments, and all of that is tracked and calculated into your score. And so again, I think you need to look at what they're doing with kids and what they're doing with the military, but it's not so different. And this is framed within cybersecurity. I mean, and increasingly, like you could have a DAO like that's an AI that's directing things that's not human. And so that's part of the conversation about decentralization, that I feel like that's the false premise, is that they want you to think that decentralization is about you and having independence and freedom, whereas I actually think that it is a decentralized system of domination, and it becomes resilient in that way. And that if you don't have a centralized place, I mean, and I can't remember if I said this already, but like in the Ender's Game, part of it was that they were able to destroy the first time the civilization because it was a hive-based civilization, and they destroyed the queen. Like they found the representation of the queen and killed it, and then they all died. And that was a centralized target that you could use to take it all out. But if you create a blockchain system of domination that is decentralized, is resilient, like no matter what forces you put up against it, it's like a neural circuit. It will just find another way around. This is from the serious games section, and it mentions Zaida there. And it says, the definition of serious games: any meaningful use of a computerized game or game industry resources whose chief mission is not entertainment. Okay. A mental contest played with a computer in accordance with specific rules that uses entertainment to further government or corporate training, education, health, public policy, and strategic communication. Right. So I think we have to understand that we are in a serious game right now. Like all of this is the metaverse. All of this is extended reality. All of this is weaponized narrative. All of this is a serious game in which the central issue is strategic communication and how we're able to communicate. Within the space of these micro-learning, badging, mastery, transcript, everything, it's gamified and it's stealth. It's a lot of what is happening is stuff that we don't fully comprehend, and we don't know what the rules are. And again, I will just go back to the Ender's Game thing, is like, that was the worst part, is at the end, even though the outcome, the objective was accomplished, the person who accomplished it was proceeding on incomplete information. Like he literally decimated an entire civilization and thought it was a game. And so the idea of stealth and there being a game that we're not in control of, and that we don't manage the rules, and that we don't have all the information, I think this is something like when I saw this is from like the MacArthur Foundation, and I was thinking that it just had to do with children and public education, and it isn't. It's so much bigger. This is a second clip from this People Analytics conference at Wharton. And this gentleman, he is a specialist in game theory, and he was funded to have a it was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, an app to target opportunity youth to give them this career pathway. His app was called NAC, into match people with their skills. And it was all based on neuroscience and psychometrics.
And you've taken this analytics piece and now extended it into sort of the gameplay piece. So what kind of things can you actually learn from how people play games?
Well, it turns out that we can learn incredibly amount of insights about people. So from their creativity to their emotional intelligence and empathy, to their leadership skills, to their grit, resilience, to how they learn, to how they think and interact with things. So it's just such a rich mechanism, such a rich machine to immerse a person in a really great environment, to modulate that environment, to measure different things, but not just kind of to throw everything into the kitchen sink, but to be very thoughtful about what we measure, how we then analyze the data, and how we then progress the experience in a very adaptive way to learn more about people. So, and to actually feed it back to them so that it's actually empowering to them.
So this is just his background. He grew up in Israel. He was in the Navy. Again, a lot of this is tied to naval stuff. Interesting. I don't know if it has tied to the maritime, whatever. But he was doing law, economics, and game theory, right? And he didn't get into a hedge fund. So guess what? Like, he decided to develop a mobile gaming thing to uncover people's hidden talent. And I think that's the thing that is so frustrating, is within the hidden talent, that people think that having more badges will give you more opportunities, but it's just about having a more granular sense of screening. It's not about more opportunities. In fact, like when I was in the education space, they said, oh, we're going to pay for all of the kids to have access to the PSAT, because guess what? Like, you could earn a scholarship, right? Including, these are kids, the majority of whom have did not even meet basic literacy standards. And it was really about data aggregation on these kids. And it didn't give them any more scholarships. Like, it wasn't as though we've expanded the pool and we're making more scholarships because we want people to have more. It was always that we're just increasing the competition. And that is what the badges, like micro-credentials, are about: more sorting. This is a slideshow about his game, that it uses algorithms to analyze micro-behavioral data streams and compute their behavioral attribute fingerprints and predict future behavior. Now, this is a guy who is a vice commander in the Israeli Navy, working at Harvard with the Rockefeller Foundation, right? But they're going to connect opportunity youth to their best selves, so that in the metaverse, right? So when people say, what could possibly be wrong with video gaming? I'm saying there could be some things. There could be some things. Like, who knows what your oh my gosh, after 6 hours, what are my micro behavioral data streams, Jason? I can't even imagine. So, all right, we're getting there. This guy is connected through USAID. It's global. Like, they really just want to help kids in the global south. Nobody asked them to come in and help, but they just really like to help because that's what they do. So what is your knack? To measure your job potential. And as keep saying, Charles Hoskinson, we've tracked you since preschool, your micro-behavioral fingerprints, and we know if you're worthy of having a job. So this is sort of the end. Like, I'm just bringing it back to the little boy, because this is why I'm doing this.